desert so you could be my water. You brought me to the fire so you could be my shield. You brought me to the darkness so you could be my morning light. If you brought me this far, if you brought me this far, wherever you lead me, I know you won't leave me. Wherever you call me, you will make a way. Wherever we're going, I will be holding to the promise you have made. You will make a way. You will make a way. When I'm in the valley, you will be my comfort. When I'm at the end of me, I find you there. When I'm in the valley.
Okay, you guys ready to get started? Welcome back. Come on down. If you're in the lobby, come on in. We're going to get started. And Brent, is the live stream rolling yet? Okay. So if you're joining us online, welcome. If you're watching this online after the event, welcome. We are getting started, so we're going to get our act together here momentarily. Come on down. Pastor Stephen, could you pull those doors shut for me? That would be awesome. Sit as close as you can, okay? Come on down to the front and fill up the front chairs. It's better on the TV screen than on the big screen. Welcome to part 2. We hardly have anything going on at this church, so we just thought we'd schedule something. Thought we'd squeeze this in. Anyway, did you all enjoy Easter weekend?
Did you enjoy the eggs, Pastor?
The what?
Eggs.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, you sent me that video, didn't you? Yeah. We had the best Easter weekend of my life, and so I'm so thankful for it. And just so many things. So we before Easter, we had the whole lobby torn up because we were redecorating and we were renovating nurseries. Literally Monday after Easter, we moved everything out of the offices, and we're renovating office spaces and making actually some rearranging and making space for new team members that'll be joining us in the coming months. And so it is chaos out there. If you look between the dividers, I walk back in that back hall, how was all this stuff in these offices? I think there's a little bit of hoarding going on in our church staff. So anyway, it's a good refresh, and then we're going to do this side. We're doing these classrooms, and then hopefully we'll do the choir room and downstairs. So we're thankful for it all. So before we jump in, what's something you enjoyed about Easter weekend? Let me just hear maybe some feedback or some testimonies or something to celebrate. Yes?
I got to be with my whole family.
That is always a blessing.
My great-grandchildren, everybody.
Yeah.
And I even got a best.
That's good. That's very good. I talked to one of our church family members yesterday that's been here for a couple of years, and this man said, I've prayed for 30 years that we would celebrate as a family and that all of my adult kids and grandkids would be saved, that they would be followers of Jesus. And he said, we came to Emmanuel 2 years ago, and in the last 2 years, my adult kids have all come with us, and most of them have been baptized. All of my grandchildren have professed faith, and they've been baptized. And these were relationships that were for many years fractured. He said, we all sat down after church on Sunday for the first time, all of us together for Easter lunch, all of us believers. And he said it was God's answer to decades of prayer. And that's just one story that God's writing. I'm so thankful for it. But it's been a miracle to see God work in that man's family. So anybody else real quick? All the baptisms. 35 people followed in baptism. And wow, that's wonderful. Yes? You said the baptisms? Okay. Yeah. Who else? Who else? Something you're thankful for from Easter? Going once? You guys are quiet this morning. Come on. Okay.
Sisters who became mothers to us.
Say that again?
For our sisters who became mothers to us.
Yes. Wonderful. Yeah, Mary Jane. Yeah. Yeah, the music and the times of worship were amazing. So good. It's been a crazy week for me. Lance and I attended a developmental retreat for pastors who work with their sons. It was psychotherapy for both of us. It was great. But I'm telling you, it was scheduled for Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday morning in the Grand Canyon. So we had to get up at 3 a.m. Monday morning after Easter weekend. And we flew to Phoenix and we drove north for 2.5 hours. Lance had never been to the Grand Canyon. And we checked in and had our evening meeting on Monday, which was great. And then Tuesday morning meeting, and then we spent a couple hours hiking the rim of the Grand Canyon. And then Tuesday night meeting, and then we got up early, drove back to Phoenix, and flew home. So it's been one of those kinds of weeks that's like, where am I? What time is it? But it was too good of an opportunity. The cost was underwritten, so it was a free thing to attend in terms of all that. So it was just a great time and great opportunity. So, and then tomorrow we are starting Revelation again. Are you guys ready? So Ashley's bringing me tea right down the middle of the aisle, and she's handing it to me. Let's give her a hand. Yeah. She's, Stephen, you see, that's how it goes, okay? Anyway, if you're not laughing, that happened in a service when I was preaching a few weeks back. But Stephen was bringing me the tea, and I turned this way, and he snuck in this side on me in my blind spot, and I nearly killed him. I was ready with my black belt. No, not really. I mean, I'm not a black belt, but I was ready to kill him. I thought somebody was coming for me. Okay, so let me just do some introductory stuff here, and I got this tea. I'm gonna let it cool off for a minute for my throat. All right, so first of all, we have given you 3 documents, and if you're online, there's a link that you can download these PDFs. The first is 2-sided map, that's these 2 maps here. One of them is the nation of Israel with lots of notations on it. The other is the region of Galilee with lots of notations. This second document, 2-sided, is first century Jerusalem. And I want you to have that as we pull up Google Earth. You'll be able to contrast that or compare that with a modern day layout. And it takes a little while to look at this over top of Google Earth, but you'll start to see it, okay? And it's important as you're reading scripture to know this is the Jerusalem of Jesus' day. And there's 2 renderings of it. There's one that it's horizontal, the other one is the same view, but it's vertical. To help you get your orientation. The third piece is, it's basically a model of the same thing. With some notations around it, and then another view, just kind of a line drawing of the same basic scene. So, did we get everybody the maps? Yes? Okay. Okay, we need 1 or 2 more up here, Stephen, if you'd bring those. All right, and then I showed 3 books that are on the table here, but some of the folks online wanted me to show them, and so I'm going to hold them up for the sake of the video. This is called Israel Rising. These are picture display books that on the inside, basically every site that I'm going to talk about, probably every site that I'm going to talk about inside this book has a modern day picture of that site, and then about 100 years ago, picture of the same site. So you can see 2 different views of the land of Israel. So this one is Israel as a country, the same publisher, same photographer, same author, did a second one called Jerusalem Rising. Doug Hershey is the author, Jerusalem Rising, and it's the same basic principle of modern day contrasting with 100 years ago or so. So you can see the development of the city. I enjoyed both these books. This book, we may or may not get to the journeys of Paul, but this is a picture of the ruins of the 7 churches of Asia Minor. So, and I forgot where I got this book. It was like a promo for a ministry. Revelation Media is the publishers of the book, and it's just called The 7 Churches of Revelation with Christoph Hanauer is what it looks like how to say that. So anyway, it just goes through all of these 7 churches that are in modern-day Turkey, ancient Asia Minor. So all 3 of these books are down here for you to peruse. If you take them, I will send you a bill. No, just kidding. There is a book you can take, and this is the journal from our Land of the Bible tour to Israel. And there's lots of, not just photos, but there's lots of information in this journal that breaks down some of the things we're going to talk about. If you'd like to have this, we have a digital file of this. And if you're online, email us. Email Ashley, ASHLEE, at ebcnewington.com, or she can email you the digital file. If you're in the room, same thing. If you'd like the digital file of this, she can send that to you. If you'd like to take, we have 7 of these up here, so they're free for the taking, okay? So help yourself to those. Really good information there. We do intend, now, unless we're raptured, okay, which it's looking like that could be any second now. I mean, you know, I've got these news feeds on Twitter. I feel like I've got to check it every 15 minutes to find out what happened next, you know, in Israel and earthquakes. And, you know, we are living in really unusual and remarkable times, biblically speaking. So aside from being raptured, if the Lord tarries, we would love to, if things settle down, eventually have another trip to Israel. When we take groups, it's an amazing experience. And I realize some of you are coming to this because you're not ever going to go to that. But if there's others in the room that would say, I'd love to do that. And the other trip we've done, and I've done this one twice, once with a group from our church, is the Journeys of Paul. And that's a great trip as well. And I'm hoping to get to some of that today, depending on the timeline. So I'm trying to think what else I was supposed to say before we get started. As we go through this today, I'm going to try to go till, we're going to take a break midway through, but we'll probably wrap up between 11:30 and noon. I won't go past noon for sure. And feel free to stop me if you have a question, okay? I want to, make this time interactive. Some of you were not able to be here last time. How many of you were not here last time? I want to see, oh, wow. Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, I don't have time to catch you all up. That was 3.5 hours of stuff. I'll review a little bit of it quickly, but we're going to jump back in, and either way, this will be new material. It'll all be very helpful to you. The other thing we're going to do is that with the next group launch, we're launching new groups this Sunday, and I'm going to do a Wednesday night group just like this. I'm going to slow it down over 10 weeks, and every Wednesday night go back through all this material and just do it as a class. So if you'd like to participate in that, you can sign up on that online, and we'll have a couple of those I'm going to be out due to other commitments, but most of them I'll be here. The second Wednesday I have the opportunity to participate in a Bible study at the Capitol, and to I'll see how that unfolds. But that's my friend Steve Amerson, who sang for us a few months ago. He's invited me down, and that's on a Wednesday in a couple weeks. So that's where I'll be that time. I'm going to go down there and straighten it all out, and I'll come back up. Crazy. I know what I was going to say. If you have been paying attention to news and to some of what we're teaching in Revelation, which we'll resume tomorrow, we pick it back up in chapter 12 tomorrow. And I know it's been a little bit of start and stop, but that's just the nature of things with being able to take a break and then Easter and different things. So it also helps me in terms of just the study to space it out, make sure I'm ready, because there's a lot to it. But just in the last 2 weeks, since I was talking about Israel, Temple Mount, we'll talk about some of this today, we talked about the red heifers. Did I mention those on the Sunday morning? I thought I did. So that is the special kind of sacrifice that is necessary for Israel to resume their sacrificial system. It's got to be a perfect, flawless red cow. They've not had one in thousands of years. They now have 5 of them. And my friend Kurt took 4 or 5 pastors to Israel a couple weeks ago. And this was a month or 2 ago, he called me. He said, hey, I'm going to Israel. Do you want to go? I said, yes, but no. I said, I think my family and my church family would kill me if I went to Israel right now. I wouldn't have to worry about rockets. I would die anyway, you know. So they went, and he said they had a phenomenal time. He said there was, it's ironic how you see on the news. He said, for the time we were there, we had no sense of any danger anywhere that we were. He said, we didn't see a rocket, we didn't see a threat, nothing. But they were at a particular location that I'm not going to say on the live stream, at a particular site, a very important historical site. And the people that run these sites, they live in the kibbutzes, they live in these communities, and Kurt was getting a coffee in the gift shop at this site. And the girl running the coffee shop said, hey, are you guys pastors from America? And he said, yes. And she said, do you want to see the red heifers? And when Kurt said this to me on the phone, I'm like, oh, I should have gone, you know. And he said, yeah. So she said, follow me. She walked out of the gift shop, across the street, down a little hill, to where the neighborhood, the community was, and into a little barn. And all 5 of the red heifers were standing there. And I need to get him to send me the photos of it. But I said, I need to show my church this, you know, because I just talked about this, and I think I shared the CBS News article. He said, yeah, the girl on the video, on the CBS News video, is the one that walked us across the street and showed us these red heifers. They just published this past week. They had a conference in Israel. The Temple Institute had a conference on the red heifer. They called it a red heifer conference on about instituting these sacrifices. And then I saw another news article this week that introduced a young man who was a descendant of Aaron. He was of the priestly line, and he was qualified to reinstitute the ceremonies. I'm just telling you, it's just mind-blowing that we're seeing this stuff unfold day by day. And then the next day I read, you know, Israel strikes the Iranian embassy in Damascus. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is happening right in front of our eyes. So these are remarkable times. All right, I'm going to pray, and we're going to jump in. And I was thinking I can drink this now. We're going to jump in, and feel free to stop me if you have a question, okay? Let's pray. Lord, we love you, and thank you for the opportunity we have now to dive back into exploring the land of the Bible, Israel, and other parts of this region. We thank you for the story that comes out of this, your redemption, your love for us. We thank you for all that you've done in our lives and that you're doing in our church for a wonderful Easter weekend, and just the stories, the many wonderful stories you're writing. And help us to be faithful to you. Help us to grow during this time and be encouraged by what we talk about. Guide my words and help us to enjoy this. And we thank you for the opportunity in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, here we go. I'm going to jump back to, I'm going to be going back and forth between Google Earth and my photos. And so we covered a lot of ground last time. So I was looking at this a little earlier this morning, and it is a striking thing to me that inside of that frame is the entire Bible story. Like there's not one, I can't think of one thing that happens in the Bible that happens outside of the map you're looking at right now. So to give you a little bit of an orientation, and I'll use the red hand as much as I possibly can. The story starts over here in modern-day Iraq, which is where the Euphrates and Tigris rivers come together, and there's another river that's now dried up. That the location of the Garden of Eden was somewhere in this area. And then you get to Genesis 12, and God calls Abraham out of his country, which is right here in Ur, and up to Haran, and that's up in this area in the Fertile Crescent, where basically Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Iran all come together. Somewhere up in here is Haran. And then Abraham makes his way by God's direction down into the land of Canaan, which is right here. So the Bible story unfolds. Abraham's family ends up going to Egypt, his descendants, Joseph, and then you have the Exodus out of Egypt, which we're going to come back to Exodus a little bit later, hopefully. They conquer the promised land in the book of Joshua. Judges, everything goes bad for 300 years. And then Israel demands a king, Saul. He goes bad. David comes to the throne. Everything's good, mostly. David makes some bad mistakes. But God promises through this whole story a redeemer through the line of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, ultimately David, the kingly line. You get to the first century, Jesus arrives, and that all happens right here in Israel and in the regions near Israel. And then Jesus ascends, empowers his disciples and his church. The church at Jerusalem explodes. Believers are dispersed because of persecution, early Acts. There's a church up here in Antioch, which is in Syria, which becomes the hub of global missions and send out Paul and Barnabas, and then later Paul and Silas. And then Paul goes up through Cyprus into Turkey and back on his first journey, and then he goes out north and across Turkey in his second journey. Wants to go north, wants to go south. God won't let him, ends up over here in Troas. And he has the Macedonian vision, come over and help us. He goes over here to Philippi, down through Athens, over to Corinth, and then back, and then sailing back across, quickly back to Jerusalem, back to Antioch. His third journey, back through all these territories again, reaffirming the work that God did. We'll cover some of these stops later. And then the gospel continues forward. The book of Acts ends with Paul in Rome. You know what? The Bible story does go out of this frame. It goes over to here, doesn't it? To Rome. So the book of Acts ends with Rome, and then you have the epistles and Revelation, and Jesus comes back, and we all have eternity with him. So we're kind of in the middle, aren't we? We're in that already, but not yet. We're the rest of the book of Acts, if you will. So this is the land of the Bible. So I'm going to zoom into Israel, and just for a modern day reference point, I want to talk about this land as it stands today, because you can get confused in the terminology, especially as you're reading. So the land that God gave to the descendants of Abraham, and that he told the Israelites to conquer in Joshua, it extends far out beyond the borders of Israel. They never conquered but maybe 10% of it. So they ended up settling in this area and then right across the Jordan River in modern-day Jordan in these areas. So what they occupy today is far less than even what they conquered in the book of Joshua. So today, modern Israel, the fact that it's even a country is a miracle of modern Bible prophecy. The fact that God has regathered these people after thousands of years is a modern miracle of Bible prophecy, and that prophecy goes all the way back to Deuteronomy, that Moses predicted they would be dispersed to the uttermost parts of the earth, and they would be brought back at the end time and regathered and reconsummated as a nation. And that happened in 1947, 48? 8. So now today, the nation of Israel, the border lines to the north, this is Lebanon, and you've got this border that goes just straight up to the north and then comes basically straight down along the Jordan River. That is the border. I guess I should use the hand here. That is the border, and all the way down to the Gulf of Aqaba, which is part of the Red Sea, and this is the Negev Desert. And then the border comes up and along the Mediterranean coast. You see the red lines. This is the Gaza Strip, which is on fire today, and what you see mostly in the news, so much in the news today. Just a very small strip of land. This nation is the size of the state of New Jersey, so it's not very big. And when you're flying into Tel Aviv, if you're flying on the south side of the plane, you can look right out the window and see the Gaza Strip. It's all right there. This red border that is jagged all in and out and around the country, this is the West Bank. And by West Bank, what they mean is the West Bank of the Jordan River. So we're not talking about the bank of the Mediterranean, we're talking about the Jordan River. This is west of the Jordan River. So this is all under Palestinian control today. And it is what they have basically ceded over to the Palestinian state. It's really complicated once you get into the region of Jerusalem. It kind of winds in and out, and there's checkpoints to go in and out. And most of this region is occupied by both Palestinians and Jews today, and for the most part, they get along. I want you to understand something about this land. 95% of these people want to coexist under a Jewish democracy. They want to peaceably coexist. And there are many, many Arabs that are not hostile towards Jewish people. They work together. When we go on our trips, we have Palestinian drivers, Arab drivers, and Arab hotels and Arab restaurants, and they very much would love peace and love to just coexist. It's the 5% of the extreme fringes that hate each other, that kill each other, that assault each other, and that cry for the extermination of the other side. So anyway, West Bank. And then when you go to the northern part of the country, just to give you your bearings, this is the Dead Sea. This is the Jordan River Valley. This is the Sea of Galilee. So all of this region is Galilee. Down by the sea itself is called the Lower Galilee. Once you get up past the sea, it rises quickly in hills, and this is called the Upper Galilee, all this region up here. And then this is the border with Syria and Lebanon. So this is today what you're hearing, a lot of rocket fire, and a lot of hostility is happening right up here on this border. So Jesus' ministry, the first 6 months, let me back up. First 6 months, he gets baptized down here, goes into Jerusalem. His temptation in the wilderness is down here. Goes into Jerusalem, clears out the temple, journeys up through Samaria. This is Samaria. In the Old Testament, this region was the northern kingdom. Let me back up. Stop me if I lose you guys. When you think of this land, you've got to think of it through every era of biblical history. And so, before Israel was a nation or a people, in Abraham's day, this was just random city-states of people that fought each other. There was no cohesion to it. And they had come from all different places, like the Philistines lived down here in the Gaza Strip area, Ashdod, Ashkelon, those were Philistine cities. They came from Cyprus, and probably before that from Greece or something like that. The land was occupied by giants, Nephilim. We won't go into all that, but it was disordered. Once it was conquered, it became the land of the Israelites, and it was a unified kingdom. So north to south, under Saul, under David, under the first part of Solomon, and then the early part of Rehoboam's reign, it was a unified kingdom. Prior to the kings, it was under the judges. It was a disaster, but it was still a unified kingdom. It was 12 tribes overseen by judges. God wanted to be their king. They wanted another king. So they go from conquering in Joshua to forgetting God in Judges and total disaster to kind of a reorganization under really Samuel, and then Saul, and then David. And with David, they just become a nation. David conquers this Jebusite city called Jerusalem. Prior to that, the capital is up here in a place called Shiloh, and I'll come back to that. But David conquers this city, Jerusalem, sets up a palace, wants to build a temple that God won't let him build, but he prepares for it. He buys the land, sets up the tabernacle. God brings the Ark of the Covenant back. There's a big celebration. David dances, and the nation and the worship is kind of reconstituted. It's like America on the 4th of July, the Declaration of Independence, the Revolutionary War is won. The nation comes together under David. His son Solomon reigns in Jerusalem. His son Rehoboam messes everything up, and the kingdom divides. So what is a unified kingdom in the early Old Testament, at the point of Rehoboam, becomes a divided kingdom. And the kingdom divides right along the line north of Jerusalem. And everything south of Jerusalem, which becomes the tribe of Judah, essentially, which is the word Judea, Judea, that becomes the southern kingdom. Think of if America had lost the Civil War. There would be a southern U.S. and a northern U.S., right? There would be essentially two countries. That's what happened in Israel. The northern kingdom was led by their first king was Jeroboam. Jeroboam was told by God, I'll take care of you, I'll bless you, I'll give you a great kingdom and bless you as a king if you will lead the people to worship me, if you'll keep me first. Immediately, Jeroboam disobeys God and sets up two pagan temples of worship. And I'm going to pull out here a little bit. One of them he sets up right here in Bethel, which is the southern border of his kingdom. The other one he sets up all the way up here in a city called Dan, which is the northern border of his kingdom. So I want you to see this. They're supposed to go to Jerusalem to worship. But he doesn't want them to go to Jerusalem because Rehoboam is reigning in Jerusalem. And he's intimidated, he's insecure as a king. He doesn't want them crossing that border and going to the southern kingdom. So he sets up a pagan altar, a golden calf, a pagan temple here and here. And the northern kingdom is immediately steeped into idolatry. When you get into Kings and Chronicles in the Bible, you read of these two kingdoms. And it kind of pings back and forth. And the Chronicles repeats Kings in many cases. And you can get confused. You have to remember this. Here's the decoder ring. The king of Judah versus the king of Israel. So the southern kingdom is called the kingdom of Judah. The northern kingdom is called the kingdom of Israel. And you can really get lost in the verbiage there between which kingdom are you talking about, because it bounces back and forth. It'll be talking 1 minute about the king of Judah and so reigned in Israel. You know, and it's unpacking two storylines. And that's how you separate between the two. The northern kingdom was always bad. They went into idolatry, they never came back. These are the stories of Ahab, Jezebel, Jehu, Joram. I mean, just a long line of idolatry, paganism, terrible things, child sacrifice, temple prostitution, pagan worship, multiple gods, priestesses of foreign nations coming in. I mean, the whole northern kingdom was just absolutely overrun. Yes? No. The borders of Syria, that's a really good question. Okay, so I'm going to use the red hands for the video. So modern Israel is here, and this is basically the same borders of Old Testament Israel, with exception of the tribes that settled over here on the eastern side of the Jordan. But you can see now, modern day Jordan is this yellow line right here that borders the eastern border of Israel. Syria is to the north. It's this line right here. And this is Damascus. And so Syria heads out this way. You following? Okay. And then Lebanon is right here. And then this little area right here where the red hand is the Golan Heights. So Israel reclaimed that territory from Syria in a recent war, and that's been a contested piece of land. The reason they needed to reclaim it is it's high altitude, looking down on this upper Galilee, and they were just sitting ducks. They could shoot rockets and military artillery down that ridge, right down into Israel. So they had to push Syria back and reclaim the Golan Heights for today. So the northern kingdom, though, goes from Jerusalem here all the way up to this border of Dan, which is partially Lebanon, partially Israel, partially Syria. It's that area right there. Does that answer your question? Okay. So the reason I'm giving you your bearings on this through the whole Bible is the regions change names century to century and era to era. So in the Old Testament, early in the Old Testament, this is called Canaan, or the Promised Land. Later in the Old Testament, it's called Israel, the land of Israel. And then further into the Old Testament, it's the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, which is Israel and Judah, okay? Then you come into the post-exile. So the big dividing point is the Assyrians come down at the end of the Old Testament history, in 7-something BC, the Assyrians come down into the northern kingdom and wipe it out. And they just take over. So for many years, this land is occupied by a lot of a mixed Gentile population, and it's under the control of Persia, basically. The Assyrians become Persians, okay? And the Persian Empire controls this land. The southern kingdom is overrun by Babylon in 5-something. I lose my extemporaneous recall of these dates. 5-something BC, Nebuchadnezzar comes in, destroys Jerusalem, takes the captives, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, all their friends. They go to Babylon. So that exile is it's a big divider in biblical history. That exile lasts for 70 years. At the end of 70 years, Babylon has been overrun now by Persia. So now you have this huge Persian empire. King Cyrus, the book of Ezra, Haggai, Zechariah, Nehemiah, Esther. These are all post-exile. Cyrus sends the exiles back, says, go back to Jerusalem, build your temple, build your walls, be you, go back home, just like God said. So they get back home, and you read the story of the rebuilding of the walls, that's Nehemiah. You read the story of the rebuilding of the temple, that's basically Ezra and Haggai and Zechariah. And they reconstitute their worship, they repopulate their land, and there's 400 years of just waiting. They're not fully united, they've not returned to their full glory. They've got these pockets and villages and cities and people groups, and they're being shepherded and pastored by priests, and they're carrying out their worship. Eventually, and they're under the Persians still. The whole region is under the Persians. Eventually, Rome takes over, and by the time you turn the page to the New Testament, they're living under Roman tyranny. They've populated their land, they're having their worship, they're waiting for their Messiah, who they think is going to release them from Rome. And at this time, it is a unified landmass, it's a unified people group, but there's regions to the land, so it's no more under the kingship, it's no more under the division, and you've got one landmass of people, Jews, living under the occupation of the Romans. And you've got the Jerusalem religious elite that live in Jerusalem in Jesus' day. And then you've got this region of Galilee up here, which is sort of backwater country bumpkins. And that's why they were marveled that Jesus was from Nazareth. You know, the Messiah can't come from Nazareth. So it just, it was all unified Jewish people, but it was really biased. This area right in here was called Samaria. And that was kind of the remnant population, part Jew, part Gentile, like mixed breed people. I don't mean that somebody told me not long ago that like that's really bad to say today. I've only ever heard it taught that way. So if you take that the wrong way, I don't mean it the wrong way, but that's what they were. They were people that had intermarried, and it was just it was a mix of people that the Jewish people despised that occupied Samaria. And they had a mountain right here near modern-day Nablus where they had set up their own worship, their own temple, their own processes of worshiping God. So, because they didn't want to mix with Jews in Jerusalem, and Jews didn't want them to mix with them, so they set up 2 worship places. So the ministry of Jesus happens in that context where you have Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, Galilee, and some other regions which you can see on the maps. Okay, so that just kind of gives you your orientation. What I want to do now is, and where we left off last time, is in the city of Jerusalem. And we were tracking the life of Jesus, and we got really to the end of his earthly ministry, and I had to rush through the crucifixion, the trials, the resurrection, all that, and the geography of all that. So I'm going to pick it up there, and I want to really give you your orientation to the city of Jerusalem. And so as I zoom in here a little closer, I want to point out a couple things. You can see the topography of this land is very diverse. So this valley here, this really, it's an earthquake fault where the Jordan River comes down into the Dead Sea. This is below sea level. I think it's 1,400 feet below sea level. And so this is desert. It's very barren. The city of Jericho is right here. It is still a modern-day city. And then the canyons journey up into Jerusalem, and this quickly rises out of this desert, and it is very steep. It is very stark. And as you get up into these hills, you come into Jerusalem, which is in the hills. No matter what direction you come to Jerusalem, you are coming uphill. This is why the Bible always says they went up to Jerusalem. We say we go up to Vermont. We go up to Springfield because we think north. In the Bible, when you read they go up, they're going altitude, they're climbing. And it's a great biblical picture of our pilgrimage. 3 times a year, people from all over the region and really all over the known world, Jewish people, during the life of Jesus, prior to that and even after that, 3 times a year they were required to come to Jerusalem to worship in festivals and feasts, Passover, Pentecost, Feast of Trumpets. And there's like 9 different names, 9 different feasts, but they're 3 different seasons. So they can be really confusing, but it's like 3 of them stacked together, and then 3 of them stacked together, and then 3 of them stacked together. But it's mainly a spring, early summer, and a sort of, so spring pre-harvest, early summer, first harvest, late fall, last harvest. And that was kind of the timing of it. And then later they established Hanukkah, Festival of Lights, to celebrate the recapturing of the temple in that intertestament period, in the 400 years between the Old Testament and the New Testament. And that's a feast that Jesus celebrated too. It's not one that God instituted in the Old Testament, but it is one that Jesus celebrated. So 4 times a year, they're coming into Jerusalem, always uphill. And they're singing songs, they've got their family. It's a journey, it's a rugged journey. They're walking from Galilee, where Jesus lived, Nazareth, to Jerusalem. So Nazareth is here. From Nazareth down to Jerusalem was 90 miles. And they would have done that on foot 3 times a year. There for a week and back. And they would sing, if you want to know, they would sing the Psalms of Ascent. When you get into the Psalms, in, I forget, 100 and something, there's 8 or 10 or 12 Psalms there that are called the Psalms of Ascent. And they were written and used specifically on this journey. And I love this because it reminds us of our journey. It's a picture, really, of our journey. We're all on a pilgrimage, and it's uphill all the way, right? A little bit downhill, but mostly uphill. And it's dusty and rigorous and hard, but where are we going? We're going home. And we're going to the city of God. That's what Jerusalem was. We are going to the New Jerusalem. And we're going to his throne and his place of ruling and reigning. And that's where our journey ends. So there really is a picture for us in all of this. But I'm going to zoom back in here to Jerusalem, and I'm going to tilt this map in a minute. I just want you to understand that this is the peak. This is the spine of the country, and it runs north and south. And you've got the Mediterranean coast on this side, which is very fertile and lush. You've got the spine of the hill country. Then you've got this steep drop into the desert and the Jordan River Valley. And then as you go further north, the Jordan River Valley becomes more fertile. This mountain spine kind of continues up this way to Haifa and ends here. Mount Carmel is up here. It's actually a long ridge. Then there's a huge valley right here, just off the southern tip of the Sea of Galilee. This open valley is called the Valley of, anybody remember? Jezreel, good. 10 points for that person. It's got another name. Close. Megiddo, yeah, which is the root word of Armageddon. Ar means hill, har, mountain. Mageddon, Megiddo, mountain of Megiddo. So the valley of Armageddon, the valley of Jezreel, same exact place. Today, it's the breadbasket of Israel. It is the San Joaquin Valley of Israel. If you've ever been to California, that valley runs all the way north and south. And it's very lush and fertile, but this is where Revelation tells us the final battle will take place, Armageddon. And so then you get up into the hill country again, into Nazareth, in the lower Galilee. This is all very rugged and hill. It's rural, it's green, but it's up and down. It's very steep. And then you get into the region of the Sea of Galilee. It's sunken in. And then you climb again up into the northern Galilee. This is another very fertile valley all the way up to the border. All right, let me go back to Jerusalem. So I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to have you take those maps I handed out to you. By the way, you can see how big Jerusalem is now. All of the map that you have in your hand, all of first century Jerusalem, could fit in about that red hand. So Jesus' Jerusalem was a little bit bigger than the size of that hand is. Are you following? Bethlehem is 4 miles to the south, which is down here, where the red hand is here. And now it's really just been swallowed up in Jerusalem. I mean, in the city limits of Jerusalem. It's just all a big part of this city. So ancient first century Jerusalem is right where this red hand is. And the closer I get into it, the more you can see. And I'm going to pull out, okay. So if you could take your map that looks like this and hold it the way this map is shaped right now, and I'm going to turn this to match the map. Sorry, this is really sensitive. Let me see if I can get this. Okay. Come on, work with me, Google. Okay. Is that about right? Can you see it? Can you see Temple Mount on your map? Right here? That's the temple, first century. Temple Mount, present day, is right here. So take a minute now and align your sight, your vision with this Temple Mount here, with the modern day view of it. And I'm trying to tell you what I'm going to do. You see it? So this is this. And I need to zoom out just to get the proportion maybe a little closer. Can you see it? Okay. So when I look at this map, here's what we're looking at. You have the upper city. You have the oldest part of the city right here, this little finger that jaunts out. And then you have, over centuries and generations, the expanded city. This all existed during Jesus' day. So, you know what I'll do? No, it's okay, because what I think I've actually got a picture of this. I can jump out of Google Earth and pull the picture up. If I put it in here. Yeah, okay. Let me see, can I do this? All right, so I need to rotate this. But here we go. Okay. Can you all see that? And you can kind of match your map with that? All right, so let me use my pointer here. This is Temple Mount, which is hugely significant. All the way back to Genesis, all the way forward to Revelation. This is the nucleus of God's story. This is the epicenter of God's story. In Genesis, this is called Mount Moriah. This is where Abraham took Isaac. That's why today there's the Dome of the Rock. The Dome of the Rock is the Muslim world has said, we are children of Abraham, and this is the rock where Abraham was going to sacrifice his son, Ishmael. They rewrite the story. And so we're going to set up this dome over this rock. That's not a mosque. It's just a sacred place. And they believe that's the rock, the peak of that part of the mountain. There is a mosque on Temple Mount today, but it's to the southern end. So all the way back to Genesis, Mount Moriah, when you get to actually early, I'm trying to remember the order of this extemporaneously. Abraham comes to this city, it's called Salem, and he meets a priest. Remember his name? Melchizedek. Maybe an Old Testament appearance of Jesus, maybe simply an Old Testament devoted, worshiping leader of God. But this city was God's city before it was anything else. By the time the people conquer the land, it's occupied by Jebusites. We don't really know the story in between there. By the time David comes into ruling power, he wants to retake this city. Again, the backstory we don't know, but he probably had an understanding that this was God's place. So he captures that Jebusite city. It's a fascinating story. They go in, one of his guys sneaks in through, the King James uses the word gutter. And for a lot of years, nobody knew what that was. Nobody knew what it meant. But as they were excavating this old city, they found there's a spring that still runs there. It's called the Gihon Spring. It was the main water supply. It's why there was a city here. It's still running massive amounts of fresh water to this day. So it was a great location for that water supply. And up in the spine country, the hills, there aren't many water supplies like that. So it was a real treasure. The Gihon Spring, this Jebusite people had walled off the city, and the spring was outside of the city, so they had created a structure, a tunnel basically, that was encased totally, that went down. They had dug these deep pools, and they had redirected the spring into these deep pools, and so they could go down this tunnel to the spring. Even though they were outside the city, they were protected. Like they built a wall around the city. They built an encasement, a building and a structure that went up through a tunnel outside the city to protect the water supply. The way you would conquer a city back then is, if you could get to their water supply, now it's just a matter of waiting, right? Just starve them out and kill them that way. So one of David's guys finds that underground and that encased water supply and finds a way to swim under it through the spring into the pools, comes up in the pools inside, kills the guards, climbs up the gutter, and that's how they get into the city. It's really a cool story. So the reason I'm telling you that is that all happened right in this section. Do you see the arrow? So the original city of Jerusalem is just this narrow strip of land right here. Today, that's called the City of David. If you go there, there's Temple Mount, there's Old City, which is more than this, and then there's this little peninsula of land that they call the City of David. It's built up with homes and condominiums and all that, but they're digging under all this, and they're finding more and more things. I'll show you pictures of that in a few minutes. But here's what I want you to know, is that when you read of the Old Testament Jerusalem, you're not reading of any of this. You're reading simply of this one piece of land right here. David's palace was up here. And then David bought this stone, it's called a threshing floor, this large open area, like 20 football fields, that's elevated up above the city. And it was just raw land and stony, rocky land. It was the peak of this mountain. And he bought that for the future site of the temple. So the whole city was encompassed in this one area right here until after the exiles returned. And in the first century, it had expanded, okay? So let me go back to Google Earth and zoom in a little more. You can see how the buildings have muddied it all up when you compare it to the map, okay? But if you'll follow the hand, I want to track this with you. So this is Temple Mount in this square, which is pretty easy to see today. The Al-Aqsa Mosque is right here on the southern wall. The Dome of the Rock is right here, kind of in the middle. There's this large space to this end where there's talk of building the third temple, the Jewish temple. And I get asked this question a lot. Do they have to destroy the mosque or the Dome of the Rock to build the temple? And the answer is no. In fact, the talks that are happening right now behind the scenes, you don't hear much about it, is that there's a whole contingency of Muslim people that want to share Temple Mount. They want to build a temple for the Jews and a church for the Christians. So they want, it's, the one world religion of Revelation. They want it all under one umbrella, Muslims, Christians, Jews. So there is land there to build a temple that could be shared. By the way, when you read Revelation, and we studied this a couple weeks ago, when Jesus told John to measure the temple, and he said, don't measure the part that belongs to the Gentiles. Remember that? If you remember, it's right there. The idea is that third temple, when it's built, and we know it's going to be built because John's going to measure it in Revelation, and then the Antichrist is going to desecrate it. He's going to walk into it and demand worship and declare himself to be God after he signs the peace treaty for them to build it and use it and do their sacrifices on Temple Mount. All that's yet to happen. The heifers are here. The talks are happening. The people are back in the land. I mean, it's just like we're right up against the last chapter of the Bible. So they're talking about sharing it, and we know it's going to be shared in Revelation because the Gentiles occupy a part of Temple Mount, and the Jews and the temple occupy a part of Temple Mount in the very last end of the story. So what I want to do is zoom in here a little closer to give you your reference point. You can still kind of see this peninsula of land, this finger of land that I'm tracing right now. Do you see what I'm doing? So this is a slope down, steeply down from the temple on the eastern side. So this is the eastern gate right here at the top of the finger. And then this is a steep slope down, and this valley is called the Kidron Valley. And it wraps all the way around down to here. Okay. Now, there was a valley that goes up this way called the Tyropian Valley. It's now been filled in and built over. And there's another valley that continues out this way, and you can kind of see it here where the hand is, and it wraps all the way up and around all the way up this way. And that's called Gehenna, okay, or the Hinnom Valley. And so this was in Old Testament. It's where they worshiped their false gods. It's where they sacrificed their children to Molech. Terrible, wicked, horrible place. In Jesus' day, it was where they burned the trash. Okay, so the Valley of Gehenna or the Valley of Hinnom. So I'm going to come back over to, let me zoom into Temple Mount here a little bit to give you your bearings. So now we're looking, north is up, east, west, south, okay? So the peak of the Mount of Olives is right where the red hand is. And I'm gonna tilt this in a minute so you can get a sense of the topography, but from that hand, this is a very steep slope down to the valley, which begins about right here. The valley crosses here, and about where this road is, it rises steeply up to Temple Mount. So in David's day, this was a very lush and fertile and green valley with the Gihon Spring running through it. In Old Testament, New Testament, in Jesus' day, when the priests on Temple Mount were sacrificing the lambs at Passover, the blood would flow out of this Temple Mount down into this Gihon Spring. This valley in Genesis was called the Valley of Shaveh. It's where Abraham meets Melchizedek and the king of Sodom, and Abraham chooses his side, decides to swear allegiance to God and Melchizedek, and rejects the king of Sodom. In Jesus' day, this is, in David's day, it was the Kidron Valley and the Kidron Brook. In Jesus' day, it was also called the Kidron Valley, but it was also called Gethsemane. So Gethsemane is right here. And it's on the slope. As it slopes up, you can see where this intersection happens right here. Gethsemane stretches all the way back up into here. You see all these trees? Those are all olive trees. And right now, this is kind of, all this territory is owned by different churches. And these are private gardens where you can, reserve a time and go in there with your group and pray, and it's wonderful. But then this is kind of the unofficial territory. I like to walk up there because it's beautiful. Let me go and show you some pictures of that. And I did show you a few of these last time. We'll go back. Give me just a second. Okay, here we go. Nope. That's not it. Okay, so forgive me. I'm just trying to find my garden pictures. Jerusalem, maybe it's under these. Nope. Let me know if you see the word Gethsemane, because I am trying to find it, and I thought I put it on. I know it's in here. Oh, you know what it is? It's going to be under Mount of Olives. Okay, so yeah, this is Gethsemane. Okay, so let me go back to the map, and let me try to tilt this a little bit. Okay, you see that? This is so fun. Okay. So the Mount of Olives, down the hill, Garden of Gethsemane, Kidron Valley, Temple Mount, Old City, original Jerusalem right here on this slope. Okay, so if I'm standing right here looking across, like the city of David, if I were standing where the hand is, looking across to the Mount of Olives, that's the view. So I'm looking east. I'm looking up the slope of the Mount of Olives. It's all a cemetery now because these people want to be first to resurrect and to go into Jerusalem with Jesus. No kidding, that's why they're buried there. So that is looking towards the Mount of Olives from the southern part of the Temple Mount and the city of David. So now we're on the Mount of Olives looking back the other direction. We just reversed the photo. So the last picture point was right there, standing where the city of David was. Now we're up on the Mount of Olives looking across the valley at Temple Mount. So this is the eastern gate. This is Dome of the Rock. This is the area that's open right now where it could be built. And many believe that the original Holy of Holies lined up perfectly with the eastern gate. So there's this historical thought that, they'd have to remove the Dome of the Rock to build the temple because that's where the temple stood. No, later archaeologists and students are going, no, it was in line with the eastern gate. And so there's room there. That spot's open for the building of a temple. Let me go through the rest of these. So this is the same view I showed you the first time. Now, what I've done here is I've just backed up, okay? So where we're standing in this photo is on a hill right at the tip of this finger, looking across the southern wall of the temple towards the Mount of Olives. So you have the peak of the Mount of Olives. This is all the southern wall of the temple. You follow that? Al-Aqsa Mosque is there today. Dome of the Rock is right there. So I want you to catch this, looking at this map again. This is the eastern side and the eastern gate. This is the southern side. So the western wall is over here. And there's just a small portion of it that the Jews have access to because most of the western wall is under a Muslim community that's been built up right up against Temple Mount. I'll show you that later. In the Old Testament and in Jesus' day, the approach to Jerusalem was down this valley all the way to this point right here, to this juncture. At that juncture, there's a pool. It's called the pool. Anybody remember the name of the pool? So it's the pool of Siloam. The pool of Bethesda is back up over behind the north wall of the temple. I'll come to that in a minute. 2 pools, I get them confused too, so don't sweat it. But right down here was the pool of Siloam. It was a huge pool, bigger than an Olympic-sized swimming pool, where everybody coming into town would stop to ceremonially cleanse. You had to be clean to go into God's presence. So it's all a picture of what Jesus would do for us. It's all a picture of God's holiness. When you approach God, you have to be clean. And so they would then come up into the city. I want to show you an artist rendering of that. Come on. Okay, here we go. This is an artist rendering of the same thing we're looking at on this map right here. So I'm gonna try to get it to proportion. Okay, that's modern day. That's what it looks like today. So again, west, southern steps, eastern wall, Kidron Valley, Mount of Olives. Kidron Valley comes down. This is the old city right here. I'm a little ADD on this, but let me go backwards a little bit. The walls that Nehemiah rebuilt were around this part of the city, just that part. In fact, when we go to Israel, you can go into the city of David. You can see how much population there is on this hill. It's a hill. It's a peninsula, and it goes down. This road goes down into a small valley, and this goes down steeply right here to that valley. But right here, there's a remnant of Nehemiah's walls. They've actually turned it into a park, and you can have a picnic there, but you can climb all over that wall, and it's the walls that Nehemiah built. It's really, really cool. In fact, I can show you a picture of those walls. I'll come back to that artist rendering. It's in this list here. Here they are. Here it is right here. So those are the walls that Nehemiah built. Isn't that cool? I love that. Here's another look at it. So right now I'm looking north. You can see the Temple Mount in the background, okay? So I'm gonna turn around and I'm gonna look south now. And I don't know if you can get the sense of it from the photograph, but it's a steep decline down into the valley, which is over these bushes here. It steeply declines. And this is a steep incline up to where these homes are. And they literally have just excavated all this stuff under these homes. Some of it's even tunnels that you climb through with reinforced steel. It's just amazing. So that is what that green area that I just showed you in the photograph is right here where the hand is. So one photo we're looking that way, the other photo we're looking up towards Temple Mount. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to that artist rendering, which was, where was it? Okay, here. Okay, so put your eyes on that for a second, and now I'm gonna go back, and let me just rotate here a little bit. Okay, and now you're looking at, first century, Jesus' day, Kidron Valley, Pool of Siloam, huge grand entrance staircase up through the city to Temple Mount, southern steps, the approach into the temple, and then in Jesus' day, obviously, it was not a mosque. It would have been the temple up there where so much of the ministry of Jesus we read about. His last week of life, he teaches in the temple 3 or 4 days in a row. The day that he heals the man at the pool of Bethesda, he's on Temple Mount. He heals a blind man, tells him to go wash in the pool of Siloam. That man would have walked all the way down these steps to this pool, come up out of the water, seeing. There would have been masses of people there to see the miracle. This was a large processional thoroughfare where even during the feast, they would do these special ceremonies where they'd go get water and they'd pour it on the altar, they'd bring it back up, and it just very festive. So in the Old Testament, this was the city of David. David's palace was somewhere up here. In the New Testament, the city had expanded to match the map, but this was all still there, the Pool of Siloam. Today, let me go back to Google Earth. Today, the Pool of Siloam, it's currently being excavated. So they had obtained a piece of land that allowed you to see about a third of the pool. Just one set of steps going down, and then it ended in a bank of dirt, and there was a home, and the people that owned that home would not sell the land to Israel. But sometime in the last few years, they have purchased and gotten possession of that land, and the last time I was there, they're excavating the entire pool, which is, I mean, the last time I saw it, it was just their tractors, and it's just absolutely stunning. I'll show you some photos. So let's go back, and let me just walk through some of these now that we've seen the map to give you a kind of an orientation. So this is the southern wall of the temple, sort of the easternmost part of it, looking up to the Mount of Olives, so you can kind of see the steep decline down into the valley. The Kidron Valley is about 30 feet higher today than it was in Jesus' day. So the valley was much deeper, and today it's just trashy and dusty and rocks, and it's literally like really trashy. I like to walk through it. I like to put on the last chapters of John and listen to them, because it's the valley that Jesus walked through with his disciples on the way to Gethsemane, and then when he got arrested on the way to Caiaphas' house. Tim? I'm going to show you a picture of it, but it would be, oh goodness, between a quarter and a half a mile. Yeah, it's a good long walk, and it's uphill the whole way. Okay, so this is the slope looking, okay, I'm taking this picture, the temple's behind me, Temple Mount. I'm looking down the slope of the city of David. So the wall that I showed you, the portion of Nehemiah's wall, is down in that area where the arrow is. Right up here right up above me is where David's temple would have been. Now, it's interesting when you get this perspective, because when you're standing at the observation point where David's temple, or not temple, David's palace. Sorry if I get these words mixed up. I mix up Jerusalem and Israel all the time. I mix up temple and palace all the time. David's palace. His palace, where he lived as king. He could go out on the top of his palace at the highest peak in the city, and all the homes were built into the hills. And even across the valley, you can see the hills. And so it makes sense how that David was on the top of his house, looking down, and he saw Bathsheba washing herself. Okay. And you know, there's a lot to that story that isn't in the text. You know, I mean, it's thoroughly David's fault, I understand that, but I've often wondered, she knew that was the king's palace too. I mean, takes two to tango, right? So I'm in the same spot, but now I'm going to turn and look a little more southeast. So this is like southwest. This is southeast. So you can see the steep decline. You can see the valley of Kidron. You can see the Palestinian city across the hill. That's all an Arab city. You can even see the trash on the hillsides. They literally dump their trash out their back window into the Kidron Valley. You're just like, wait, Jesus walked this valley with his disciples on his way to Gethsemane. Jesus often resorted thither. I mean, this valley is where Abraham met Melchizedek. It's where David's garden was. It's where Jesus suffered, and now it's where they throw their trash. And if you get the close-up of this photo, you can see these old tombs dug into these rocks. This is the bedrock, and there are literally tombs that go back to 1st century and before in that area, but then you can see the trash on the hillside and the half-constructed homes and the falling apart. It's just really, really sad to see this valley in the conditions that it's in. Now, the last couple times I've been there, they are cleaning it up, and I'm happy to see that. When you take this walk down the Kidron Valley from Gethsemane, so we're looking south, you end up coming down this footpath into this community, and the pool of Siloam is down that way around the bend. Same spot, I just turned, and now I'm looking kind of east. And again, I'm looking from the hill down steeply to the valley, and then up steeply towards the Mount of Olives. Okay, same thing, I just zoomed out. So you can see these are the graves that go up to the top of the Mount of Olives. Same view, but now the valley turns around. Now we're looking kind of northeast. The valley turns around, it curves around right there. Are you all able to connect the dots here? Okay. So I'm standing about where the hand is, looking down this slope, and now we're looking out this way as the valley curves around. Okay. Same shot looking south that I just showed you. Same shot looking east that I just showed you. That's the peak of the Mount of Olives. Now we're kind of turned looking a little northeast. That's the corner of Temple Mount and the southern steps. So this would have been the approach up to the temple in Jesus' day right here, all these steps. And a lot of this excavation I'll show you in a little while. We're going to take a break in just a couple of minutes. Okay, same. I'm just going to cruise through these. Okay, so now this shot is a little further around the temple. The eastern wall is up to the left. And this is the staircase that goes down into the Kidron Valley. These are some old tombs. The Kidron Valley hooks up and around this greenery here, but we're looking at Gethsemane, where these churches are, and up on this slope is Gethsemane. Same thing, looking south, Kidron Valley. Now we're looking at Gethsemane. You can see these are olive trees. All right. I'm down now in the Kidron Valley looking back up at the eastern wall, southeast. So I think this is the pinnacle of the temple where James was cast down and martyred. But you can see the steep climb up to, on this side would be the southern steps, this is the eastern wall, so the eastern gate is further up the wall, just to try to give you a sense of the rise of the land. There's the eastern gate, looking from the floor of the valley. Same thing, looking across the valley. Same thing. That's the Kidron Valley, eastern gate. Mount of Olives slopes up to the right. So that's the walkway that goes down towards the Pool of Siloam. Temple's up on the right. Mount of Olives is up on the left. Gethsemane's behind me. Same valley, basically. I'm just trying to get a sense of the slope. Okay, so this is going south. City of David is up here. Temple is up on the right. We're going towards the Pool of Siloam. These are excavations in the city of David. So this goes back to Old Testament period, to Jebusite, before David conquered the city. Jebusite ruins. So now I'm looking north. Same valley, just looking north. That's the walkway looking south. You can see the Temple Mount up here. Oh, okay, so this is a different trip. You can tell it's a different time of year because everything's green. You know, the first picture was probably October. Same valley now is in March. You know, and it's green like that for like 2 weeks. But I did think that was really cool, how that trip is like, wow, it's all green now. So this is all the same space. Yeah. I was shocked to see that space so green and grown up in contrast to the dirt. So these are the excavations of the city of David that go back to Old Testament period. These are homes that were built into the hillsides. Okay, this is, what is this? Oh, this is the city walls. Look, okay, we don't need to spend any time here. Kidron Valley green, Kidron Valley brown. Isn't that interesting? Same spot, 2 different trips. Yeah, that's really interesting. Okay, so this is a side view. This is a picture hanging in the city of David as you're going through it, that I snapped a picture of it. So this is an artist rendering of the Old Testament city of David, Israel, Jerusalem, and this is the same piece of land in the modern view of it, okay? And you can see in this artist rendering that structure I was talking about that covered the spring. So the spring, came out of this hillside, and the Jebusites built this staircase, this tunnel down that was totally encased and guarded in these pools, and David's men swam under that spring up into these pools and then climbed the staircase into the city, and that's how they conquered it. So David's city would have been his palace, and eventually Solomon built this temple. So the king's palace and then the temple up here. Okay. Oh, is that a video? Yeah, okay, watch this. I don't know how this is going to come through because I just videoed a video with my phone. But it's like a computer rendering. So this is the Palace of David, the city going uphill. And then the temple at the very top of Mount Moriah, today's Temple Mount. Okay? So I showed you that artist rendering. We're going to come back to the staircase. The staircase that goes from the Pool of Siloam up to Temple Mount would have looked something like this. They have found this staircase, and they are excavating this staircase, and it looks like that because they're digging it under all these homes. And so, and that's the thing, even the Arab communities, Israel has the authority to go under them, to excavate. So under the Arab community that's right up, the Palestinian community that's right up on the western wall of the temple, they've dug way down, and you can go into these tunnels that go along the western wall, all the way the length of the Temple Mount. And these stones that are like 30 feet underground are the original stones that Solomon put into place. They go all the way back to the Old Testament. So Israel's digging under all these Arab communities, and they're reinforcing. You can see all the steel reinforcement. So this is a little to the left of the staircase. It was you can see the stone trench on left and right. It's a very narrow passage, and they've excavated it all the way from the Pool of Siloam up to the Temple Mount. And if you dare, you can walk it. And you come up right at the southern steps of the temple out from underground. And so we did it. We had a good time. It took us maybe about 30 or 45 minutes. And a lot of it, you're like this. Walls on both sides, and you're watching your head. But it was quite an adventure. And you know what that was? It was the sewage. It was the septic ditch. And that part of the temple, that part of the city was called the Dung Gate, okay? And if you can't figure that out, talk to me later, okay? But this is where that excavation comes out. So you can see the southern wall of the Temple Mount. You can see the peak of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This plot of land, they were going to build a parking lot because right on the other side of these construction trailers, all the excavators, this is like their offices, there's a street there, and right on the other side of that, I'll show you on the map. So this tunnel starts down here at the Pool of Siloam. It goes underground all the way up under these homes, and it comes out right here. The site, the tourist site, it's called City of David. The entrance is right here. And you enter into this, and you go into this excavation that's part of David's palace, and then you can work your way down through this city, layer by layer, seeing the different kinds of building that happened on top of old city, layers and layers. And you kind of track that all the way down to Nehemiah's wall, and then you kind of come out down here at the Pool of Siloam. But I want to come back up to this spot and talk about it for a second, and then we'll take a break. So they were going to put a parking lot in here for the tourism that happens right here in the city of David, and this is the entrance into the Western Wall, right here, and this is the Western Wall, modern day. So this is a very busy thoroughfare, tour buses and cars, it's just crazy. So they're going to build a parking lot. Well, if you're going to build anything in Israel, you have to have the site researched by the archaeologists and historians to find out what's under it before you can do anything. So when they began to excavate that site, they found the old city. I'm kind of like, well, duh. What did you think you were going to find there? This is the southern steps of the temple. Of course you're going to find residences, and they have found so much stuff there. And you can, I wasn't really supposed to be there when I took this photo. I go on these tours, and I'm like, the tour bus and the guides, they all go that way, and I'm like, I find my way to places that I'm not supposed to be. But you can see in this picture, right over here, hold on, come on. Okay, see these trash bags? They're literally trash bags, and there's dozens of them. They're huge canvas bags, and they're full of pottery shards. Handles and vases and bowls, and they're throwing them away. Every time I go there, I'm like, come here. I take Dana, I take my son, hey, grab a pottery shard. I've got pottery shards from those bags, handles and stuff. It's just like, and I hold it up. I said to Larry and Lance one time, I said, I'm pretty sure Jesus held that right there. I'm pretty sure, But it's just amazing to me because everywhere you go where they've excavated, there's piles of pottery shards. And they say, please take them. Because to them, they're just trash. It's like 1,000 years from now, somebody coming to Connecticut and excavating and finding plastic spoons and forks that we threw away, What's this? It's called Tupperware? What, So that's just fascinating to me that this is the same excavation. You can see it's very active. You can see the trash bags right here, full. Now, they do take, the ones they're throwing away are trash. What they're doing with most of this is sifting through it very carefully because they are finding things of value. They're finding coins, they're finding inscriptions. It's really amazing what they are finding. Boy, if they ever get to dig under Temple Mount, it's going to be amazing what they find. So they're basically preparing that for tourism. You can see the entrance over here to the city of David, the tourist site. To get here, you kind of got to sneak through one of these gates and get in there, but it's a lot of fun. Okay. This is the shaft that goes down to the water supply. This is the gutter that David's guys climbed up to defeat the city. This is the shot from David's palace up to Temple Mount. This is the end of the City of David tour at the entrance to the Pool of Siloam. So you can see right here, the pool comes out, and we're going to pull out of that in a second. That's the water supply, by the way. That's the cisterns that they dug to hold the water that go way down. This is from the top of David's palace, or what would have been David's palace, looking down on the city. This is me at Nehemiah's wall. I know you wanted to see that. Let me just kind of go through here. This is coming down the side of the city of David. This dates back to the time of David, and these were homes built into the side of the hill, and this part of the city was administrative government officials that lived here because it was attached to the palace. I'm going to skip all that. Okay, we'll stop here and we'll take a break. This is an artist rendering of first century Temple Mount looking towards, help me out, see if you've got your bearings yet. What's out in the distance? There you go, you got it. Mount of Olives is in the distance. So we're looking at the western wall of the temple. The part of the western wall that they pray at right now is, I'm going to trace it. It's about this much of it. So when you see the pictures, Most of the western wall is underground, and most of it goes far north from where they actually have access to. So first century looking east, temple, southern steps, the original city is off to the right, and this was Temple Mount with Antonia Fortress where the guards were stationed. So when you read of Jesus' teaching, when you read of him clearing out the money changers, they were up under these porticos called Solomon's Porch. Bethany, where Jesus stayed with Mary and Martha and Lazarus, was on the other side of this ridge, just over the Mount of Olives. Okay, it is 10:30, so we're gonna take a 10-minute break, okay? 10:40, we will resume. Hit a restroom, refill on coffee, donuts, whatever. We'll pick it back up here.
down to earth, prophesied Savior, angels announce your birth. Who could imagine your worth? Heir of divinity, clothed in humanity, Jesus is mine. Lift it up now, Jesus. Jesus is mine, forever my soul has a home. Jesus is mine, never will I walk alone. Never to face what he paid with grace. Child of the Savior divine, Jesus is mine. Jesus is mine. Jesus is mine. Crucified Savior, despised and forsaken for me, carried our burden, left there to die on that tree. Mercy lavished on me, bore our depravity, paid our penalty. Jesus is mine. Jesus is mine. Forever my soul has a home. Jesus is mine. Never will I walk alone. Never to face what he paid with grace. Child of the Savior divine, Jesus is mine. Jesus is mine. Risen Redeemer, prophesied for all to see, promise unbroken, and up you arose just for me. Christ our liberty, crowned in majesty, Jesus is mine. Jesus is mine. Jesus is mine. Forever my soul has a home. Jesus is mine. Never will I walk alone. Never to face what he paid with grace. Child of the Savior divine, Jesus is mine. Jesus is mine.
Okay, let's get started. 10 minutes flies by, doesn't it? Come on back in from the lobby. Okay, you guys okay? You enjoying this? Okay, because I just get lost in the thoughts, and like I said, I'm a little ADD. I'm bouncing from topic to topic, but that's because so many things happened at all these places. So I want to finish up the city of David and then move on to some other sites. So just to give you, again, your bearings, we're on the southern steps of the temple. We're talking about this piece of land right here that's called Old City, or the original city of Jerusalem, that goes all the way back to Old Testament and to Genesis, really. And then the city of Jesus' day was a little more expanded up into this area. So I want to just go back to my photos on City of David. I talked about Nehemiah's wall. We ended with this rendering here. This is going to feel like I'm bouncing around, but one of the interesting parts about this city is that as they were excavating, they found a tunnel that goes a different direction to this water supply. And they came across an inscription in this tunnel. It's called the Shiloah inscription. 2,700 years ago, you can read the story. Hezekiah, the city was besieged by the Assyrians, it was going to be, and they were preparing for that. And he wanted to reroute the water supply from out of the city to inside the city. And he had to do that by carving out this rock. So a team of men started at one end of this fissure, and a team of men started at the other end of this fissure, literally with, hand by hand chipping through this rock. And they dug this tunnel. And how they even started at two ends and met is a miracle, how they met. But this is the place in that tunnel where they met. And they made an inscription. Hezekiah, we met here, and we broke through, and we saved the city, and we got the water supply. So it's really a cool experience in that tunnel. This is a hard picture to look at, but okay. In the city of David, there's this level where they believe was the temple or the palace of the king. And they've excavated under that. So you're walking across this modern construct, and then you go down some stairs and you're on this bedrock, which would have been the foundation of the palace. And there's this spot where there's a grate, and there's a little inscription or a little plaque that says, "This is a cistern." And so I just took my phone and I looked down in that cistern, which is now, filled with dirt and mud and rocks, and it goes pretty deep. I just took a picture. The reason I snapped that photo is I had just preached a message about Jeremiah being thrown into a cistern in the king's palace. And I can't prove to you that that's the cistern where he was thrown, that that's the pit he was thrown in, but he's rescued by an Ethiopian man who comes and pulls him out of it. You can read the story in Jeremiah. I just found that was interesting, that was a cistern under the king's palace. So I'm going to finish cruising through the pictures of the city of David. This is some of that excavation I was telling you about, where the foundations of the palace would have been. And you can see the structure on top is the tourist area. So this is the part you kind of climb down underneath. This is a rendering of what David's palace would have looked like built into that hillside. This is another shot of those same excavations I showed you before. I'm trying to remember how I got this picture. But to give you your orientation here, this is the ancient city of David that I've been talking so much about. This is the southern steps right here. Western wall is back up over here. You can't really see it. Mount of Olives. So we're looking kind of northeast. This is what used to be the Topography Valley that's now filled in. And then the Kidron is down over here. Oh, I know where this is from. This is from Caiaphas' house. This is the upper city. So on your map, it's this area up here. It was on a hill up above the original or the older city. So the religious elite of Jesus' day, they had these big mansions. This was Pacific Palisades. This was Beverly Hills. These were the guys that were devouring widows' households. The widow giving her 2 mites so they could build their palatial mansions on the hillside. This is where they lived. So looking out from the courtyard where Peter betrayed Jesus, looking down over the city, and it's a very interesting sight, but that just gives you a view of the city of David. Walls of Nehemiah, again, I think that's the inscription or a replica of the inscription. Okay. I took this picture because it gives you a sense. So this picture we're going to look at is an aerial shot taken up over where the red hand is looking down to the east of Temple Mount. The reason I show you that is that's the western wall, and it's just a portion, a small, very small portion. It would go about another 30 feet down underground, and then it would go hundreds and hundreds of feet to the north, which is the left side of the photo. You can see off to the right side of the photo some excavations that are happening, and it goes steeply downhill there. I'm going to show you some pictures of that in a few minutes. That's another artist rendering of the pool of Siloam and the staircase going up. Okay, this is the pool of Siloam as it was a couple of years ago. And we're looking kind of northwest. So Temple Mount is way up. If I could go back, this photo is taken where the red arrow is, looking along these steps. Let me go one more, I'm sorry. So these steps go this way. See that? Those are the original steps going down into the pool. There's another row of them. So going back to the artist rendering, it's right here. These steps are what were excavated. The staircase photos that I showed you was a portion of this staircase. I'm sorry. Okay, so as of a few years ago, all you could see of the pool was this section, and that dirt wall and all this land. Now, this is now being cleared. You can see it's cleared. The first 3 times I went, there was a house right there, and there was a backyard. Somebody's garden was there, but you can see now they have taken possession. They've put up a fence all the way around it, and that pool continues all the way across this ground underneath all this dirt. And the very last time I was there, they got tractors that they're clearing it. That's the steps of the pool. Okay, so that's a previous trip. You see the garden? I don't know if you guys can see it. That's the same spot. That's the cleared spot. That's the overgrown spot before they had the land. Just interesting to me. Okay, there's the tractors clearing it. I should have put these in different order, but it's the same piece of land, and you can see now they're digging and clearing. I want to go to that tractor driver and go, be careful. Don't break anything, you know. So that's the city of David, the Kidron Valley, and that traces all the way back and all the way forward into the life of Jesus. I want to go back to Google Earth, and I want to trace, I did this at the very end of our time together last time, so I'll be quick about it, but I want to trace with you Jesus' last few days on the map. Okay, so he comes out of Jericho up to Jerusalem. He stays in Bethany, which is where this hand is, just over the ridge of the Mount of Olives. And 3 days in a row, he comes into town, he comes into the temple, and he teaches. So the first day, he just observes everything. The second day, he comes in and drives out the money changers, which is the second time he does that. He did that at the beginning of his ministry and at the end of his ministry. And then he teaches, and he is, if you're reading the ends of the Gospels, this is when the religious leaders are interrogating him and trying to entrap him. And this is where he is speaking to the crowds and crying out, beware of the Pharisees, beware of the leaven. I mean, he is going right into their territory, screaming as loud as he can, beware of these people, you know, and calling them out, which is why they hate him. I mean, he is now in their face, you know. It's so strategic. It's so on a timeline. It's right coming into Passover. There's 1 million to 2 million people that have come into town. It's overrun with people. And he's preaching the gospel for his last few times on Temple Mount. And the religious leaders can't kill him because he's too loved. But they're waiting, and they're talking to Judas. They're going to figure out a time. Helena?
Is that when he said, I can take down this
Yes.
and build it back?
Tear down this temple, I'll raise it up in 3 days. Same place, same time frame. Yeah. So he's going into town, teaching, spending the day, confronting his enemies, preaching the gospel, giving everybody a chance again to be saved, going back to Bethany in the evening. One of these evenings is where you read he has dinner, and Mary brings the ointment and breaks the box of ointment on his feet and anoints him. And Judas gets upset because we should have sold this and given the money to the poor, like he really cares. That all happened over here in Bethany. So every day he's walking down this hill into town and then back to stay with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus.
And what's that distance?
Oh, good question. That is probably a couple miles. It's not much. Okay, if you've ever been down New Britain Avenue, down the hill to Dunkin' Donuts, that's my place right there. Those people know me. I pull up to the drive-thru, come on through, Cary. And then up the hill to the intersection in New Britain there where the Catholic Church is, the stop sign, it's about that far. Yeah, I mean, just walking down and up. So Jesus, Thursday night, he tells his disciples he does the triumphal entry, we know that. That was his first day in town. One of those trips back in the evening, he stops on the Mount of Olives and he teaches the disciples about the end times. That's Matthew 24 and Luke 21. We call it the Olivet Discourse. Why is it the Olivet Discourse? Because he's on the Mount of Olives, teaching about the sign of his coming. And so that happened on this slope. When he weeps over the city, that happened on this slope. When he curses the fig tree, that happened on this slope. The last day, they go to the upper city for their dinner together, which that took place somewhere up in here. And it's just a tradition. They don't know where it took place, and it's been raised and rebuilt so many times. The place no longer exists. But there's good reason to think it's there, which I won't go into all that. But somewhere up here, he had his supper with his disciples, and then they walked down this hill, probably down this direction, back down to the Kidron Valley, and then up the Kidron Valley. Now, would there have been a way to cross the city and go down? Probably. So we don't know exactly what route he took, but he goes up the Kidron Valley to Gethsemane, where he oft resorted thither. I showed some pictures of this last time, so I'm gonna save our time there. But suffice to say, like I said, there's kind of an organized spot there where the tourists go, but then this garden really stretches all the way along this hillside. And in the right season of the year, it's still very beautiful. So he goes there to pray. His disciples fall asleep. The guards come and arrest him, and they take him all the way back across town to this area over here, to the house of Caiaphas. He is tried. He's questioned by Caiaphas. He's brought before the Sanhedrin, which is a Jewish council, and that's where they're hitting him in the face. They're questioning him. That's where Peter denies him, and then he is sent to Pilate. There's some debate archaeologically about where Pilate was. So if you go to your map of the old city, your map, this section right here, there's two things I want to point out to you. On this western side of the city, Herod had a palace. There's still remnants of that palace today. And it is right, excuse me. It's right here, along this wall, was Herod's palace. There are some people that believe if that's where Herod stayed, then that's probably where Pilate stayed. So Jesus could have been brought from Caiaphas' house down here, up here to Herod's palace. The other thing that existed during this time, along in this back corner, this northwest corner of Temple Mount, on your map is this structure right here. It's called Antonia Fortress. Let me pull up a picture. Okay. Here's an artist rendering of the Temple Mount from first century. So you have southern steps, you have Mount of Olives across the way. This structure right here on the back corner of Temple Mount was called Antonia Fortress. It's where the Romans put a garrison of centurion and soldiers. You read about those soldiers, especially when Paul was arrested and taken out of the temple grounds when they were going to kill him and taken custody. They took him up to this Antonia Fortress. So some believe Pilate was staying there, and that they would have taken Jesus there. So one way or another, Jesus is tried first by Pilate, then he's sent to Herod. So did that happen all in Herod's palace? Maybe. Maybe it was just, I'm sending you across the hall here. Or was he sent across town? It's really, we don't know for sure. But Antonia Fortress would have been up over here. So Jesus is arrested, taken to Caiaphas, taken to Pilate, to Herod, back to Pilate. This is where he is finally condemned. And at this point, he's flogged, he's condemned. Pilate says, to take him. He washes his hands and tells them to crucify him. Barabbas is released. So at this point, I'm going to spin this map just a little bit. The storyline goes one of two directions, okay, depending on who you believe. So we're looking north, and what you know as the Via Dolorosa, have you ever heard of those terms? Okay. The Catholic tradition says that Jesus was taken from the Antonia Fortress, and you can see the words right there, Via Dolorosa, down this steep slope, and then up a steep slope, and to the left, and then into this area right here, which at the first century, this section right here, which is called the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, this was outside of the city. If you look at one of your first century renderings, you'll see this location. Today, it's all built up. There are multiple churches on this one site. This is the traditional site of the crucifixion and the tomb, the resurrection. Traditional, by that I mean the Catholic and the Orthodox, the Greek Orthodox, and they all have churches there, okay? There is no semblance, you can make no sense of it if you visit there. It's all been built up and it's all a church location, and you can only use your imagination. You could never imagine if that's the site. And there are true Bible-believing Christians and archaeologists, historians that do believe that's the site. It's just been built up over years, okay? The place that we take we take groups there, but it's usually really, really crowded with Catholic tour groups. The other direction that he could have gone is out the Damascus Gate. The Damascus Gate is right in here. It's right here, I think. So, and it's about the same distance, actually. So it's really plausible that Jesus was taken out here, and again, outside the city. It's all very built up now, but there was a quarry. So Garden Tomb was a quarry, Church of the Holy Sepulchre was originally a rock quarry outside the city. But so was this area right here, outside the northern gate, which is the road to Damascus, which is kind of cool because who got saved on the road to Damascus? Yeah. So when he left Jerusalem to go arrest those Christians, he went out that gate and straight up north, which goes all the way to Damascus, which is another photo. So this area was a quarry, and they have done some excavation. And this is a very busy Arab community right now. This is all the Muslim quarter of the old city. So when you cross this street, a lot of times you read of the tensions and things flaring up, the demonstrations on Temple Mount. Even the last couple days, they had to do tear gas and stuff because of Ramadan. One trip I was there, they closed this gate because somebody got killed. They were doing demonstrations and somebody got killed, and it's right here. I think it's right here. So if you look up Damascus Gate, like on a Google search, you're going to find a lot of tumult that happens right there at that gate. There's this big bus station there today, and on the back of that bus station is a rock cliff, and right around the corner from that cliff is a garden, and right at the back of that garden, they excavated and they discovered a tomb. It's called the Garden Tomb. So this is where we take our groups. And personally, now, I don't know. This is probably emotion. My gut tells me this is where this happened, okay? My intellect says it's probably Church of the Holy Sepulchre. My heart says, boy, I think this is where it happened, okay? So I'm gonna go pull up the pictures of this area right here, which is just north of the city. And we'll talk about Golgotha and the Garden Tomb, okay? So let me backtrack a little bit. This is from the house of Caiaphas looking over the city. This is the stairs descending from Caiaphas' house. So Jesus walked those stairs for sure. This is the dungeon under Caiaphas' house where Jesus would have been held as a prisoner. These are the rope is not old. I showed this last time, but the holes where they tie up the prisoner, the ropes are there to give you a sense of it. Okay, so now this is a picture of what's called Golgotha, or the place of the skull. And it's from like 100 years ago. It does not look like this today because that bus station is right in front of it. But this is what it used to look like, and you can see the eyes and the nose and kind of a mouth. This is the skull glaring at you, okay? So that picture today, I'm now standing off to the side of it, but that's the same cliff face. I'm standing over here taking the picture kind of sideways, but that's the cliff face, and the eye holes are somewhere right here. They're barely still there. It's deteriorated over the years. And so they've taken and created a viewpoint for tourists that looks out over this bus station at the place of the skull. If this is where it happened, it makes sense because it's the main road coming into the city from the north. It's a major thoroughfare, and that the Romans would have used a place like that to crucify, to execute, because they would hang these guys up on a cross and leave them out there to rot and die as a criminal deterrent. They don't mess with Rome. And so he would not have been crucified up on the hill. He would have been crucified somewhere down underneath this cliff along the roadside. So it's not really on a hill far away stood an old rugged cross. It's something like near an Arab bus station far away stood an old rugged cross. We really need to rewrite the words. You know what? I retract that, because when you look at the real picture, this just makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Okay, so basically all of this region, you would call this Mount Moriah. You would call this Zion. You would call this Jerusalem, the city of God. And the reason I'm pulling out is that, where Abraham told Isaac, God will provide himself a lamb, is really the same place that God provided himself a lamb. That's the center of the universe. And so it goes all the way back to Abraham saying, God's going to be the lamb, to then Jesus showing up and being the lamb on that hill. It's the same hill. It's just a little further up the hill from the original rock. So you can see if this is where Abraham sacrificed Isaac, and you walk uphill a little bit and you're at the place of the skull. It's all the same ground, okay? Same mountain. So Jesus did provide himself a lamb. And then we know he's going to come back. He's going to set foot on the Mount of Olives. The mountain is going to split in two, and he's going to go into the eastern gate, and he's going to rule and reign from Temple Mount in Jerusalem. And that's the millennial kingdom. And I'm getting ahead of myself, but those of us who believe in him as Savior, we will have been raptured. We will come back with him when he lands on that mountain. We'll be in the great cloud following him on white horses and robed in white. And the victory will be won by the word of his mouth. And he will establish his 1,000-year millennial reign. And we will rule and reign with him. We will be a part of the administration. So I don't know if we get to choose our part of the world to rule over or govern or be a part of. But I keep flip-flopping. I think Dana wants Orlando because Disney World is there. But I just love to dream about that because that's going to be the best life you've ever lived. Your gifts, your unique identity and design is going to be fit perfectly into the purposes and plan of God, and you're going to be in a new body that doesn't age and can't sin and can't be hurt and can't die. And I believe we will be ministering and even teaching the gospel to, this gets really complicated, but there are people that survive the tribulation that are believers that come right into the millennial kingdom without dying. They're in their natural bodies. They're still sinful. And over that 1,000 years, the earth will be repopulated. And it will be occupied by two groups of people. Redeemed saints in their glorified bodies, that's us, and natural-born humans who have now multiplied all over the earth, and they will have 1,000 years growing up on planet Earth with no crime, no sickness. Can you imagine? For 1,000 years. They still will have to choose Jesus, though. They'll still have to understand the gospel. We'll be telling them about time that existed before their time. It's so like these dystopian movies and miniseries, before the apocalypse, and then now, the Hunger Games kind of stuff, but it's going to be real. It's going to be Jesus ruling and reigning, and even at the end of 1,000 years, Satan's going to be released for a short time, and he's going to deceive them again. There's no battle then. It's over, and Satan is condemned, and eternity begins, new heaven, new earth, new Jerusalem, all that. But that 1,000-year millennium, we're going to talk about that more in the coming weeks. So Temple Mount is where this all happened. I want to get back to the garden tomb and back to my photos, though. And so that's the place of the skull. That's what it looks like today. So if you turn from that spot and you take about a 60-yard or 70-yard walk through a garden, you come through some trees, and that's your view. So let me show you again on the map. So the viewpoint on Golgotha is at the tip of the finger here. The walk back through the garden, and then you come out to here, and this garden tomb is right here, built under these homes. What I want to tell you about this is you can see the bedrock is right here. And then, the wall and the homes are built up on top of this. So they've excavated this. It goes back to the first century. It has been modified since the first century. But this is where we take groups, and it's an amazing place. And it's owned by an association that's Christian. It's called the Garden Tomb Association. It's based out of England, and they have volunteers that come and work there. And every person that comes there, and there's hundreds of thousands of visitors to that site, every person that goes there hears the gospel. So they walk you through, they take you to Golgotha, they sit you down and tell you about the crucifixion. They walk the group to the tomb, you sit down, and they teach the whole gospel. And then they give you time to walk around and take photos. But it's a real mission, and they share the gospel thousands and thousands of times every year, right there in the middle of that Muslim community. So that's pretty special. This is the inside of that tomb. And on the wall, there's a cross and they've since repainted it, but it was there, and it dates back to the Byzantine era, which is like 3rd century. So Byzantine churches were gospel-believing churches. And this is what strikes me about this site, is that there's a Byzantine inscription in that tomb. So at some point in the 3rd century, somebody believed that was the place where Jesus was buried. That's me and my son. That's my son Larry. For those of you who don't know Larry, he's a pretty quiet guy. So anyway, okay. So that is the garden tomb. Zoom out here.
What's the distance between where Christ was crucified and where he was condemned? So he had to carry his cross.
Okay, that's a very good question. And there's 2 answers. There's actually 4 answers to that question. So let me put together the scenarios. If Jesus, the question. Okay, what was the distance? Thank you, and that's for the online too. The distance between where he was condemned by Pilate and where he was crucified. All right, so let's say that he was condemned over here at Herod's palace. So there's one of 2 directions he could, or one of 2 destinations. He either went here to the Holy Sepulchre or all the way across town to Golgotha, to the place of the skull. They could have been a rock outcropping here that looked like a skull too. So if he's condemned here, he's going to go here or here. If he was condemned at Antonia Fortress, which again, tradition puts it there, and there's 2 schools of thought on it, depending on which archaeologist or historian you're talking to. If he was condemned here, then he either went here to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre location or out here, the Damascus Gate, to this spot. I favor the idea of him being beaten here and condemned here, sent over to, tried here, sent over to Herod, sent back over here, and then taken out to Golgotha and to the garden tomb. That's what I favor, but it's totally emotional. It's just totally subjective. What's that? The distance? Oh, goodness. Not far at all. I mean, this is maybe a 1/4 mile from here to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and maybe a 1/4 mile to Golgotha. It's really close. You can walk there in 5 to 7 or 8 minutes. Okay, let me just stop and take questions here since we got it.
So when you go there as a tourist, are all these places owned by Israel? I mean, it seems like you're walking freely, like touching things.
Yeah, you really are. You're walking through a very dense population center in Old City. Let me show you a couple of pictures, and we'll come back to the questions. Let me go to my Old City pictures. Come on, it's got to be here somewhere. Oh, okay. You know what? I kept them in another folder. So the Old City all of it is like this. It's rock, stone structures, narrow corridors, shops, villages, markets. It's walls all around you. It is a maze. It is a maze of narrow streets. You can't even really hardly get cars in there. They're riding motorcycles and. Okay, like, you see this structure right here? This was an arch that dates back to the 1st century, and they've just built into it. They've just turned it into a support structure for all their other buildings and churches. This is the road, the Via Dolorosa, but it's right through Muslim. You can see the Muslim minaret there, and this is an entrance to Temple Mount out of Old City, and this is interesting. So to bounce to modern times, these guys are Arabs genetically, but they're Israeli citizens. And the arrangement is this. The Muslims control Temple Mount religiously, but the Jews control all of the law enforcement in Israel. The Palestinians control law enforcement in the West Bank. No, wait. Parts of the West Bank. No, it's the most convoluted agreement. And when you hear it, you have to hear it 3 or 4 times to make sense of it. For a long time, I didn't know, are these guys friend or foe? Because they look Arab, but they're wearing Hebrew patches. And then one day somebody explained to me, no, these are Arab Israelites. They are Arabs that have become Israeli citizens. It's kind of like legal immigration in America. And they're Arabs, their DNA, you could say, is Palestinian, but they are working, they've become Israeli citizens, they have become Israeli police officers. And so the Jews put all the law enforcement around Temple Mount, they make it Arab law enforcement officers because they're guarding the Temple Mount for their own people. But that's why these guys get killed. You ever hear in the news that an Israeli police officer got stabbed at Temple Mount? This is the guys that get stabbed because they're considered traitors by the Palestinians. You're on the wrong side. You've joined Israel, okay? So these extremists, it's their soft target because it's kind of like the airport. At the ticket counter, it's wide open. It's a soft target. Once you get through security, everybody's been checked. This is the security checkpoint. So these guys will come up to these guys and just charge them with knives, and they'll usually do some damage, but I'll tell you what, these guys they shoot first and talk later. It's totally different than America. It's like the terrorist stabbed a police officer and the terrorist was killed. Like immediately they're shot, and then they figure out what happened, Same thing at the checkpoints where cars are going through. You'll read about these cars that'll just charge them. But I really have respect for these guys when I see them because they are living dangerously. At any moment, it could go badly for them. So again, this is modern day. This is Old City. What it looks like today, it is all very dense, very populated, and it's been there's a Muslim quarter, an Armenian quarter, a Christian quarter, and a Jewish quarter. And it kind of works around Temple Mount that way. Lots of little it's really fun to go down here and go through these markets. We spend a couple afternoons or evenings doing this when we take a group. You can see the density of the tourism, open markets. It's just the architecture. You feel like you're in an Indiana Jones movie or something. It's just all of it dates way back. So now you can see a stark difference between the Jewish quarter and all the other quarters, by the way. It's nicer, it's more modern, it's cleaner. They take very good care of their areas. This is the center of the Jewish quarter. There's a big, beautiful courtyard, and there's restaurants, kind of like a food court all around it. These are the Jewish synagogues and buildings. This is called Jaffa Gate. That goes out to the city of Jaffa or Joppa. And if you go straight down that walkway all the way to the end, you end up at Temple Mount or in the Jewish quarter. This is actually the modern city. This is not Old City. This is north of Old City, modern day Jerusalem. It's called Ben Yehuda Street. It's kind of a tourist attraction. It's ice cream shops and restaurants and outdoor singing and performers. And it's really, really nice to go to when there's not a war. It's heartbreaking to see, the city under siege and stuff. Because when I've been there, you just walk around 8 to midnight or 8 to 10 or 7 to 10. We just go out and walk the city, and it's just amazing. It's just so fun. Ice cream. I'm on an ice cream mission the whole time I'm there because it's the land flowing with milk and honey. This is still the Jewish quarter. It's the main synagogue in the Jewish quarter, and this is actually a gold menorah. It's gigantic. It's worth, I think, millions of dollars. It's the menorah they want to put into the third temple. Again, outside the old city. Okay, so I'll come back to, this was cute, this kid riding his bike in front of that menorah. That's that menorah. Man, it's staggeringly big and beautiful. Okay, let me see what else I put in here. They start military service right out of high school. So everywhere you go, there's 18-year-olds carrying automatic rifles. 18-year-old girls carrying automatic rifles. I thought that was just amazing, seeing a bride out in front of the walls of the city. I don't know why I put all these photos in here. Oh, you know what? I didn't sort these photos. That's why. Okay. So, yeah, markets. It's just amazing. Okay, back to questions, and we'll come back to my storyline in a minute. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that in Israel there are Arabs. Okay, now are the Arabs, do they follow Muslim religion or Jewish or Christian?
So the question is, do the Arabs follow Muslim religion, Christian religion, or Jewish religion? So let me break down the population. You have Jews, that's a DNA. You have Arabs, that's DNA. And you have Israelis, that's citizenship. And you have Palestinians, that's citizenship. You have the Palestinian state, the Palestinian Authority, and you have the Israeli government. So the Jews are Israeli by birth, and they are mostly practicing Jewish religion. There are many Christian Jews, though. They're called Messianic Jews. I've never met a Muslim Jew. So Jews are mostly worshiping God through the system of Judaism, although there are many secular Jews who don't practice Judaism at all. So if you go out on Sabbath, for instance, they're supposed to just stay at home and rest on Sabbath, but you'll see people driving and riding bikes, exercising and working and eating at Palestinian restaurants because they don't close. And so you realize, this is not really, they're not all devout. Many of them are secularized, especially when you get into Tel Aviv. And it is very much a modern day Babylon kind of scenario, or Sodom and Gomorrah. So Jews are practicing Judaism or secular, or Messianic Jews. The Arabs are going to generally be Muslim or Christian. It's a small percentage, it's like 1 or 2% Christians in the whole country. But the tour guides that we've worked with that are Arabs, they've been Christians. Some of our bus drivers have been Christians, and they were converted from Islam. You've probably read in the news about Jesus appearing in dreams to Muslim people. That's true. It's bizarre and wild, but I have firsthand accounts from more than a half a dozen situations and scenarios that were, they literally lost everything. They lost their family. In some cases, they lost their spouse. They were rejected as dead to their family, their parents, their brothers and sisters, because they converted to Christianity. And you ask them, why did you convert? Because Jesus appeared to me in a dream. My friend Ray pastors in Brooklyn, International Baptist Church, and a few years back, before COVID, he called me one day. He said, Cary, I've got a story to tell you that's going to blow your mind. I said, sure, go for it. He said, I had 2 men from the Middle East, Muslim men, that showed up at my church door, came into our church office and asked for me, if they could talk to me. And he said it freaked us out. He said, I didn't know what these guys wanted, and they said they had just gotten a visa to come to America. They had just landed in New York, and they needed to talk to him. So they sit down in his office, and he says, how can I help you? And they begin to tell him that they had each dreamed the same dream. And the dream was that when they got to New York, they needed to go to Brooklyn and find this church and find this man and listen to him. They both dreamed the same dream. And they were friends. And so when they landed, they went right to International Baptist Church and found Ray, and they said, God told us to listen to you. And Ray shared the gospel with them and led them to Christ. Our bus driver from the last 2 trips ago, late December, I was there with Kurt and with Troy Shoemaker, the president of Pensacola Christian College, and Jeff Redlin, pastor of the campus church, and their wives. Me and Kurt, my wife didn't come. She had already been recently. And God just gave me this. You guys probably were upset at me for being gone. It was between Christmas and New Year, and then I had another one. It was nutty the way it worked out, but I'm so thankful that it happened because it was like right at the end of my degree work on the doctorate, and God just gave me this extended moment to be in Israel more than I intended to be. And in this case, it was with 5 of us or 6 of us, and we got to see so many things. But that was the case where our driver, small minivan bus, he said the same story. He said, I was a devout Muslim in an Arab village, and Jesus came to me in a dream and told me the gospel, and I was saved. And he said, the morning I got up and I was a believer in Jesus, I went out into the main street of my village and began to scream, he's real, Jesus is real, we have to believe in Jesus. And he said, his family quickly grabbed him and brought him into the house and said, you can't do that, they're gonna kill you. You know, it was, the Middle Eastern mindset is so different than our mindset, but he literally lost everything. He lost his family, they won't talk to him, he's dead to them because he's a believer in Jesus. So, okay, other questions? Yes, sir. I've never gone to Gaza and never want to. As Americans, yes, we probably could. Before all this mess, we probably could have. They're not going to be real friendly to us, you know, but you could probably get through there. But Jews, definitely not. They would not be allowed in. There's 3 types of areas. The bulk of the areas are shared by Arabs and Jews peaceably. And then there's some areas that are Palestinian, but Jews are allowed in. And then there's some areas that are Palestinian only. And there's big signs that say, if you're Jewish and you go past this sign, you're out of our protection and you're in danger of your life. So they're just not even allowed to go past those. When we've gone into any of those kinds of areas, if our guide is Jewish, we drop him off somewhere. And we go in and we come out and pick him up later. It's because they won't go in there. And usually we don't even take the tour buses into those areas. But on a couple of the trips we've gone the site, if I could detour for a second and maybe we'll have time to do this at the end. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted to do. Come on back. Okay. Sorry if I'm making you dizzy. Okay. So looking north, back into that West Bank, you know, when Jesus traveled into Samaria, he went straight up this way. And this is Nablus, the capital of the Palestinian Authority. So all this is it's all considered Palestinian. But Jacob's Well is there, Mount Gerizim. But just down here, just north of Jerusalem, is Bethel and Shiloh. And those are very significant Old Testament sites. And they're both really cool to go to. We do go through the West Bank every time when we're coming out of Galilee and traveling down the Jordan Valley through Jericho up to Jerusalem. But that's generally not a hostile experience. The closer you get into these population centers, the more hostility there would be towards Jewish people. Okay? A couple other questions? Yes, sir.
Where is the Garden of Gethsemane in relation to the Garden Tomb?
Where's the Garden of Gethsemane in relation to the Garden Tomb? It's not far. So I'm going to zoom in here. All right. So here you are. Temple Mount. Garden Tomb is right here. Garden of Gethsemane is right there. Literally, that's like a 6 or 7 minute walk. And from here to there, it's downhill. You're coming around the old city and then downhill into this Kidron Valley. So you can see, I don't know if you can see the words, Muslim quarter, Christian quarter. It doesn't say Armenian quarter, it should. Somewhere in here is the Armenian quarter. And then the Jewish quarter is right in here. That's modern day. Other quick questions? Yes, sir.
Is the Garden of Gethsemane, is that a large
It is pretty large, yes. Is the Garden of Gethsemane a large area? That's the question. In its original form, it would have been all of this area. And that's a pretty big space. I mean, these are 2-lane roads. You can see the buses in the picture. So you take a look, and that's a tour bus. And you just think about the expanse of this space, and it kind of goes up the hill too. Good. Yes, sir. Doug? Yes. Yes. Yes, the Mount of Olives was covered all with olive trees, and his question was, the Romans destroyed. The city, every time it's gotten destroyed, they just pillage and they destroy everything. So when Israel got possession of this land, you read Mark Twain's account of this land in the late 1800s, and it was barren desert. There wasn't a tree. Every tree in Israel they've planted, they've cultivated. And the Bible says that this land would blossom, the desert would blossom like a rose. And that is exactly what's happened to the nation of Israel. If you zoom out on Google Earth, the right time of year, the right season of the year, you'll see everything around it is barren wilderness desert except for Israel. It's green and lush, and it has truly come to life. It is very, very fertile, and they're very effective at cultivating the land. So it's amazing. Other quick questions, and I'm going to press in. Yes? Who makes up Hamas? Palestinian and Arab people who have occupied that region. And I'm not the authority on all the politics of it, but obviously under the control of Iran and other enemies of Israel. Hamas is the name of the governing power, but the people, honestly, it's very sad because Hamas are the criminals, but the population, the people, most of them would be just as content to live in peace under Israel, under Israeli authority. Most of them are, now they've been programmed, they are literally indoctrinated from the cradle up to hate Israel, to hate Jewish people. But it's irrational because the Arabs that live in Israel, that are Israeli citizens, are flourishing, and they have all the freedoms that we have and all the peace that we have. And so there's just this irrational, it's satanic, hatred of Jewish people that's embedded in the powers, in the power centers. And that's the tension that apparently the Antichrist is going to be the only one to be able to resolve it. But this is the region of Gaza that is so much contested right now and under attack. And it is very sad for the population. And let me tell you, I was thinking about this yesterday. The secular media is putting all the burden on Israel to resolve this situation. Well, what about the billions of Arab people that are within proximity all around this region of the world, and the trillions of dollars that they could bring to bear from Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Egypt and all these? Why isn't the Arab world stepping up to help? Why is all the burden on Israel? And it just tells you they don't want these people. They don't value these people. The whole thing is a game. And ultimately, they just despise Israel, and there's no rationale behind it. It's irrational because it's driven by Satan. Satan hates God's people. And this is what Revelation tells us. We're going to be studying this tomorrow in Revelation 12, that the dragon will persecute the seed of the woman. And that is what we are witnessing right now, but it's going to ramp up in the tribulation. It's going to get worse and worse. And they're going to flee to the wilderness, which most people believe is out in modern-day Jordan, maybe Petra. So, good question. Any other questions? Yes, Helene. So her question is, when was the Garden Tomb and Golgotha excavated? And I know it was in this last century. That's the only answer I have for it. So yeah, it was excavated recently and that tomb was discovered. Yeah. Yeah. You can look up Gordon's Calvary. Gordon is the name of the last name of the man that helped with the excavation and the discovery of that site.
If I can make a quick comment that Napoleon once was in Israel, and he said he was overlooking the plains of Armageddon, and he said all the world's countries could put their military groups here and maneuver them
Yeah.
for the greatest battle that this earth has ever seen.
Yeah. So he said Napoleon remarked that the Valley of Megiddo would make a great location for a world war to happen with all the military coming together in that battle. Other quick questions? I'll keep going.
When are we going back?
When am I going back? When it simmers down a little bit. I will tell you that Kurt is going back in May, and he said, "You want to go?" And I said, "Yeah." And Dana's like, "No." It's the last week of May. He's taking another 5 or 6 pastors. I want to go see those red heifers. And I could even go Monday and get back Saturday and still not miss a Sunday, but I don't think it's going to happen. I think, I'll tell you what I think. I think we're going to be raptured. That's what I think. All right. Now, it's really weird having a foot in both worlds. Like, look forward to his coming, anticipate it, and occupy till I come. I don't live in this, it's gonna happen right now. Right now. No, it's gonna happen right now. I'm not trying to pin down a date. I'm not trying to make the eclipse mean something. It might not. I don't care. The Bible doesn't give me a decoder ring for how to figure that out. The authority to me is the scripture, and Jesus said, no man knows, so just, occupy. Look forward to it, but occupy. So it's like, there's this line of thinking out there that almost like if you make plans, you're not anticipating his coming. And if you're anticipating his coming, you're not making plans. I think we can do both, but it does feel a little bipolar. So if the Lord will, I would love to go back in a year or two when things simmer down. But for sure after the second coming, when we're all back, we'll go. Absolutely, 100% for sure. Yeah, that's gonna be a lot of fun. Jesus is gonna make the whole place look a lot better too. And he'll be able to maybe give us a tour. What a tour guide he would be, huh? Other quick questions? If not, I've got a few more sites I wanna talk through. Okay. Goodness, what did we do last? We did Old City. Let me just look at my list here. So we've done Galilee, Golan, Jordan, Mount of Olives, Jerusalem. Oh, this is interesting. Bethesda and the southern steps. So the pool of Bethesda, I'm going to go back to, if you get dizzy on motion, close your eyes. I'm going to go back to Temple Mount. You can look at the map you have. Okay, so Temple Mount, City of David, Temple Mount, Garden of Gethsemane, Mount of Olives. Just north of Temple Mount was the poor section of the city. It's where the animals were fed and kept for sacrifice. And it's Passover, they're slaughtering maybe 200,000 lambs, maybe 100,000. I mean, and here's how you do the math. 1 lamb for every 10 people. If there's 1 million people that come into town, that's 100,000 lambs for Passover. They're all being slaughtered at 9 a.m. Guess what else is happening at 9 a.m.? Jesus is being nailed to the cross. So on Temple Mount, lambs are being slaughtered, 100,000 to 200,000, because there could have been 2 million people. And then right outside of the city, Jesus is being crucified. The timing, the providence, how did they miss it? And what I would tell you is they missed it willfully. The leaders knew who Jesus was. They knew. And that the parable where the the man goes away and he sends his servants back and they kill the servants, and then he sent his son. And the squatters said, oh, this is the son, we'll kill the heir, then we'll have control. That parable is Jesus pointing out that they knew full well who he was. Those religious leaders did. He just did not fit their agenda. He was a Messiah that they couldn't control. So they wanted to get rid of him. So on the north side of that city was the pool of Bethesda, where Jesus came and healed the paralytic man. That what he said, do you want to be made whole? Do you want to be well? We studied that in our journey through the Gospel of John. So this was like Skid Row of the city. It was the impoverished. It was where, if there was a rescue mission, it's where the rescue mission would have been. And so Jesus goes there, and that's really precious to me. So that, on your map, that pool looks like this. And there's a close-up picture, like a model of it. I'm going to go back to this. No, that's not it. Oh, here it is. Okay. So that is what the pool of Bethesda looked like. And you remember John talks about, I showed this picture when we taught through John, by the way. He describes it as having 5 porches. And for many years, archaeologists and historians scoffed at that account because they pictured a 5-sided, what do you call that? Pentagon? 5-sided, And they said, no, those didn't come into architecture and design until much, much later. There couldn't have been a 5-sided porch. And then they found it. And they began to excavate. And they found a structure that looked like that in its original form. And you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1 across the middle, 5. And it just, once again, the Bible was proven true, and all the historians and archaeologists were proven wrong, that it wasn't a pentagon or whatever. It was a different kind of 5-sided porch. So it's really hard to get this image out of what I'm going to show you because several churches over centuries were built up on that site. So the original pool of Bethesda is like 30 feet down from the areas you walk and see now, okay? So when you're standing there looking down into this area, you're seeing layers of churches and churches that were built up on top of the original pool of Bethesda. This is another section, but see all the way down where that arrow is in the abyss? That's the pool, okay? These were the steps down into the pool. This wall here was one of those support walls. So again, it's hard to get this picture in your mind, but this is the support wall. And the bottom of the pool was way, way down. So that's what it looked like. Okay, so that's the pool of Bethesda. I want to talk for a few minutes about the southern steps of the Temple Mount. Okay, so on this photo, I should just go full screen here. Okay, there we go. On this photo, the western wall is directly on the other side of this barrier here. This is a ramp that goes up to Temple Mount. It's the only way for tourists to access it on the Jewish side of the city. So the western wall is right there. Just on this barrier side, they have excavated down. You can see, like the ground of the western wall is right here, but they've excavated much lower to the level. This road right here is the level of the first century. You see these stones that are stacked up here? Can you see that? That's how the Romans left those stones. I mean, that they excavated, they found those stones piled up, just like Jesus prophesied, not one stone would be left on another, and they left them there. I'm going to come back to that picture because I've got more of that picture. So as we're standing here, we're looking at the western wall and the southern wall. This is the corner of the temple. And I'm going to turn a little bit more towards the southern wall in this photograph. Same spot, but now I'm turned looking at the southern steps. This area and the area just past this wall have been slightly, not enough, but excavated so you can see how it descended down into the city of David. And this was the ground, this area was the ground where the worshipers would come up to the temple, and it's where Peter preached the gospel in Acts 2, and 3,000 people believed and were baptized. So I'm going to show you some more pictures of the southern steps because this is a very significant area. Now this is down on the steps, along this wall, along this excavation. Okay, wait, that's not it. That is it. So you can see all these excavations. This is bedrock, by the way. So this is rock, and carved into this rock are many, many what are called mikvahs. And when you stand at them and look at them, you can see stairs going down, and you can see a pool that's carved into the rock, and then stairs going up. It looks just like a baptistry. And there are dozens of them. And they were privately owned by wealthy people. And there was the cleansing that they had to do at the pool of Siloam, but then they had to come up the steps, and at the entrance to the temple, they had to be cleansed again. So it was a second cleansing in these mikvahs. This is why they could baptize 3,000 people, because they had all these mikvahs there. And on this open space was where Peter preached and where where Pentecost occurred. And this is the excavation of that space as it stands today. It is quite a place to visit. And you can see there's active excavation still happening along this wall. Okay, so I want to give you the orientation. We're looking the other direction now. So this way, we're looking towards the Mount of Olives. We're looking east. And I'm going to turn all the way around and look west now. And you can see how the hill goes up. And this is the Jewish quarter that we're looking at off of the southern and western side. And then I'm going to just use my arrow here for a minute. Caiaphas's house is up over here. This structure right here is a church that is the traditional site of the Last Supper. So that's in the upper city. Oskar Schindler is buried right out over there in a cemetery. That's pretty cool to go see. So southern steps. There's some of the carved out areas of the rock. I love to go here. These are the steps leading up to the southern wall. And we sometimes teach there or read scripture there. You can see the stones built into the rock. Okay, here's a shot of those stones cast down from street level. So this is a first century street that went along Temple Mount. Look at the perspective here. This is ground level of the western wall up here. And this is street level of first century. And all this has been built up. And even from street level of western wall, you've got another 30 feet up of the Arab community on top of that, going further up along the wall. So those tunnels I was talking to you about, over by the western wall, they've dug down along this wall and excavated all the way to the north end of the Temple Mount. And you can go along in those tunnels. It's really claustrophobic, but you can go along in those tunnels and see stones. These stones date back to Herod the Great in first century. And some back to Solomon. So there's another view, same spot. These were the arches that used to exist on that street. Same street, it's an artist rendering of the same street, just a first century view. More stones. You can tell I like those stones, didn't I? All right. Here's our group from last November sitting on the steps, and we're talking about Pentecost. We're talking about Jesus walking up these steps. There's the Mount of Olives in the distance. Okay, and I already showed you that picture. All right, we are winding it down here. I got about 10 more minutes. We did City of David. We did Garden Tomb. Okay, I would like to show you some other sites that are out. I've kind of given you the best orientation of Jerusalem that I can give you now. So I'm going to zoom out, and I want to talk to you. This is going to take us a little bit back to Old Testament as well, but there's 3 sites I want to talk about very quickly. Okay. So Abraham's journeys bring him down through the land of Canaan and along this hill country, this spine. And this is called, it goes all the way from the valley of Megiddo down through Samaria, which in Jacob's time, this is, let me start again. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, patriarchs. Jacob's 12 sons, the original 12 tribes of Israel. Their stomping grounds were basically from the north, which is Shechem and Dothan, all the way down this spine in the hill country to Beersheba, which is right down here in the south. So there's a highway that goes along the Mediterranean that in David's day and prior was occupied by enemies, Philistines primarily. There's a highway that comes down the Jordan Rift from the north. Abraham was told by God and led by God to occupy this region, this hill country. So when you're reading Genesis, you're reading from between here down to here to Beersheba, when you're reading the patriarchs, the road of the patriarchs. The reason that's important is because all of their sites are in these hills. So Abraham and Isaac spend time in Beersheba. Hebron is where they're all buried. Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebecca. Sarah wasn't buried there. No, maybe she was. One of them wasn't. Jacob. Anyway, the tomb of the patriarchs, I'm getting confused, and my extemporaneous recall is weak on this. But anyway, that's the burial site. You can see it's in the West Bank. We've been hearing about Hebron in the news. It's been a real flare-up place. There's been a lot of tension in Hebron. But it's, so going south from Jerusalem, it gets progressively more rocky and more rugged. This is what the land looks like. All the hills are terraced. And it just gets more and more, less and less fertile as you go south. I'm trying to give you a sense of the topography. So when we get down to the very south, this is a part of Hebron. This is the site in Hebron. That's the burial site. It's the cave that Abraham purchased. And it's a field and a cave. It's called the Cave of Machpelah. They've now built this giant structure over this cave. Half of the structure is controlled by Israel. Half the structure is controlled by Muslims because they both claim to be descendants of Abraham. So you go in, and it's on the Jewish side, it's very Judaism, and on the we can't go into the Muslim side. But what they've done is they've taken the middle of this and they've created these sepulcher memorials, and the Muslims look at it from their side and the Jews look at it from their side. It's the weirdest thing. So obviously I'm looking into the memorial from the Jewish side. So Sarah, Abraham, Jacob, Leah. So it's Rachel that wasn't buried there. This is outside of the structure, looking down into the bedrock. It's fenced off, but it looks to me like, you could climb down into that cave. But, over thousands of years, who knows what's even in there at this point. So that's a little bit about Hebron. And let me show you some shots of Beersheba, which I've used in a message. So they found remnants of an altar, the four horns of an altar. That's what that looks like. This is old Hebron, dating back to Abraham and Isaac. But this is what's amazing to me, is that God said to Abraham, and then Moses prophesied, God said to Abraham that your children are going to occupy this land. And then Moses predicted that they were going to be unfaithful to God and they would be dispersed throughout all the ends of the earth. But at the end, they would be brought back and they would occupy the land. And so in this shot, to me, it's a miracle, because you're seeing the city that existed when God made the promise to Abraham. And in the background, you're seeing new Beersheba. That is modern Beersheba, and all the high rises and all the business and all the commerce and all the children of Abraham have come back, and they are dwelling in that land just like God promised. Folks, that's a miracle. They're very prosperous. Let me look at the city. Yeah. That's one of the nicest parts of the country, but I will tell you it's also very close to Gaza. So let me show you on the map where we are. When we're in Beersheba, I mean, there you are. You're a 15-minute drive, maybe 20, from Beersheba to the borders of Gaza Strip. These kibbutzes and towns where the people were massacred are all along this border here. And the bravery of these people to settle and to have farms and villages and towns in this region, they're truly like colonial America when it was still occupied by Indians and by, the British Empire was coming after us. And the bravery of some of your ancestors that settled in Wethersfield and Newington, they knew the danger they were embracing. These people are modern day pioneers and revolutionaries to build homes there. What's that? The people in Gaza, the terrorists came from Gaza and broke through this fence and massacred people in these cities. Yeah. So on this side of this red line is Israel. This side of this red line is Gaza. And instead of using the billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars of aid to make their country nice, they built tunnels and bought weapons. It's sad for the population that's living there, that they're under that kind of oppression. But Jesus is going to fix it. Yes? Sodom and Gomorrah. Where was Sodom and Gomorrah? Good question. It's debatable, but probably somewhere in here. Because, I'm going to go north now to these sites because that's a good question. When you come north of Jerusalem into the West Bank, you go through a checkpoint that's been pretty hostile recently. But we did this a year ago. And I showed this last time, but this little city right here, Beit El, is Bethel. Beit means house, El means God. So Bethel, the English transliteration, is house of God. But in Hebrew, it's Beit El. This is where Jacob had the dream of the ladder. This is where Abraham and Lot stood and parted ways. And Abraham said, you choose your direction, I'll go the other. And Lot looked out and saw the well-watered plains of Sodom, right? So from that peak, he's looking out into this valley. And on a clear day, you can see that valley, and that would have been lush and green. So he chose to go down there where there was water supply, leaving Abraham up here in the hill country where he had to depend on God for rain. Does that answer your question? I'm trying to remember who asked that question. Yeah, does that help? Okay. The other side I want to talk about very quickly, if you keep going north into Samaria in Jesus' day, or the northern kingdom in the Old Testament, or just the northern unified kingdom, you come to Shiloh. This ruin, ancient Shiloh, was the original capital city when Joshua and the people conquered the land. They ended up setting up Shiloh as the center of worship. They set up the tabernacle there permanently, the Ark of the Covenant. And so this is where the people came for their feasts and festivals. They've excavated around the hills of Shiloh. They found campfires, they found remnants of pottery, and all the evidence that the tribes camped all around these hillsides for Passover, for a festival of tents, for all these feasts. So it was the capital. It's now an excavation, and it's a tel, which is a ruin. T-E-L means it's a city of ruins. And when you pull into this, it's a tourist location, but it's very historical. It's surrounded by hills. This ancient city is very, very excavated. And the site of the tabernacle was right out here, and it's all surrounded by hills. This was 367 years, I think, the center of worship for the nation of Israel, all through the period of Joshua, Judges, 1 Samuel, up until David conquers the Jebusite city. So when you read about Eli serving as a priest at the tabernacle and his sons, his wicked sons, Hophni and Phinehas, who he did not restrain, that happened at Shiloh. When you read about Hannah and Elkanah and their family coming to worship, that was at Shiloh. When you read about Hannah praying for her son Samuel, that was at Shiloh. When you read about her bringing him back to Eli as a little child after he was weaned and giving him to the work of the Lord. So Samuel grew up in Shiloh. And then Samuel became the man that anointed Saul. He was kind of the spiritual leader of the nation, along with Saul, along with David. So he was kind of legendary. He was kind of the man of God that kept the nation intact before they had a king. He was the one they demanded a king of. So Shiloh is a very interesting site. Let me show you some pictures of it real quick, and then we'll wrap up. I probably showed you guys Shiloh before. If I did, I'm sorry. So this is the northern country going up into Samaria. Again, fertile, but very rocky. You know why they decided stoning was a good method of execution? They had unending supply of ammunition. You know, no matter where you are, you can reach down and pick up rocks. Doesn't seeing this, though, bring the Bible to life? In so many ways like that, you know? He leads me beside still waters, green pasture. You can see how green pasture would have been hard to find at times, seasonally. So he's a faithful shepherd. So the terraces, the hard work it took to farm this land, to live off this land. This is Bethel. If you go just out past that sign that's in the distance, you could see the plains of the Jordan Valley. This is Shiloh, okay? So we're looking at the hills north and east where they camped. All the tribes and their families would camp to have these big feasts and festivals annually. That's Bethel, so my pictures are a little out of order. Okay. So, you know what? Maybe Shiloh is up here. Yeah, this is Shiloh, looking west. This was again in the spring. The almond trees were budding. This is Shiloh looking east. This is the ruins of Shiloh. You can see the excavations partially done. This is looking north and west from the ruins. This is looking straight north from the peak of Shiloh down towards the ruins. And most believe that the tabernacle was somewhere out in this area when it was set up. Still a view of Shiloh. Okay, so that's Shiloh. All right, what do I have? Oh, I'm overtime. Okay. Any final questions? I'll take a couple and then we'll wrap up. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So for those of you online or that couldn't hear, she said apart from the Holy Spirit, that this really brings the Bible to life. Apart from going there, this is, your next best option. But yeah, getting the topography, getting the locations, the geography, it's all so very, very important. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. The Jewish people, you're saying? They just cannot. That's a very good question. She's asking, how do the Jewish people miss the idea of Jesus when all this is surrounded? They just view Jesus as a Jewish renegade ideologue that lost, as a fake Messiah, because their Messiah would not suffer and be crucified. They cannot tolerate that. They are expecting a conquering hero. They have a very mystical way of interpreting the Old Testament, and this is where Revelation makes so much sense, because in that final 7 years, and in the last 3.5 years especially, so many Jews are going to come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah. And there's a point at which Paul says all Israel will be saved. There's a point where everyone that's remaining alive, unsaved, Jewish, they will believe in Jesus. There will be many that will be killed between now and then because of the persecution of the Antichrist, many believers that will be martyred. There will be many that will be converted and preach the gospel, but they will have heard from the 144,000 witnesses. They'll have heard from the 2 witnesses, which may be Moses and Elijah. They will have heard the angel flying through the heavens. They will have seen all these cataclysmic events. And in the very final position, they'll see Jesus coming back. And they'll have no question, And at that point, they will receive him as Messiah. The good thing is, that's really neat, is we have a lot of friends in Israel right now that are some of the people we do with the tours with, and some of the guides, and some of the people that operate the tourism. They are Christians, and they are active in Messianic Jewish communities and propagating the gospel. So it's interesting to see that component. And we've actually reached some Jewish people through our church over the years that live in this area. And those are great stories. But it is very, very sad that they miss him. When is part 3? Well, I don't know. I mean, there's about 80 people that didn't come back. So next time it's going to be like 50 of us. No, part 3, I will do it. I probably won't do it in the next month or 2. But part 3, here's what I would do, because we ran out of time. I want to do the Exodus across the the Sinai Peninsula into northern Saudi Arabia. There's some amazing things to show you online of that. And then I would really like to do Journeys of Paul and talk about the Mediterranean and show Ephesus, Corinth, Athens, and some of those sites. So we'll do that in another time. Oh, you're putting me on the spot. The Bible gives the measurements. And extemporaneously, somebody could Google it faster than I can remember it, but it's something like 5 miles square in every direction, or 50, or I forget. It's huge. Okay, it's the size of like, oh, I just read this recently. Something like the Appalachians to the Rockies, or so it's going to descend from heaven, the New Jerusalem, and it's going to be square. But it is absolutely gigantic. It is miles and miles. Peter? 1,500 miles. Okay, 1,500. That would make sense, because one illustration I read was like it spans from the southern border to the Canadian border and from the Rockies to the Mississippi or something like that. But it's square, so it's not just, we think of landmass as flat. In 2 directions. It's 3 dimensions. So it's 1,500 every direction, which is gigantic. That's just massive. And that's going to be a city that descends. And you're getting ahead of me. It's Revelation 21, 22. Charlie? I don't know that he's saved. He tried to call me the other day, and I couldn't answer his call. So I texted him and said I'd call him back, and I haven't done it yet. But I said, I can't talk right now. How are you doing? He said, I'm wishing you a happy Easter. No worries, I'm good. I'll see you in the coming days. So I haven't heard from him in a couple of months. This is a sheikh, Muslim sheikh, that fled this region because the king of Jordan wanted him dead. He was one voicing for peace and for a peaceable agreement of sharing religious spaces between Palestinians and Jews. And so the extremists hate him. He's very well known in the Middle East. He migrated to America temporarily to be safe. He has a friend that teaches at Yale that helped him get here. And he showed up at our church. And he was asking me questions, so we sat down. I've spent about 6 hours giving him the gospel. He says he's an evangelical Muslim, but that's impossible. So I don't know if he's a Muslim man seeking Jesus sincerely, or if he is a committed Muslim seeking to bring about the Antichrist's one world religion. I don't know. But it is interesting. I don't want to give you his name because this is online. If you Googled him, I Googled him to see if he was telling me the truth, and he's in all the main news of Israel going back 4 or 5 years. He was in every main news outlet. So he was a known voice. He's spoken to both houses of our Congress. He's been to the White House a number of times. How he ended up sitting in our church and in my office, I have really no earthly idea except for providence. But I told him, I said, I can love you and be your friend as long as you can let me tell you about Jesus, because I will always be trying to get you to convert. So we'll see where that goes. All right, a couple more, and then I'm going to pray and let you go. Yes, ma'am. Just curiosity. Yeah, she asked me, why would I be interested in seeing the red heifers? Just curiosity. It's not a good thing that they want to reinstitute their system, except for well, it's a good and a bad thing. I'll just say it that way. It's the good meaning of that is we're at the end times, that prophecy is being fulfilled. And that's how I view it. It's a fulfillment of prophecy. It's like, wow, this is a modern day reality that God said would happen. But religiously, spiritually, biblically, it's not a good thing, because it just means they're rejecting Jesus still, So, but the significance of prophetically is amazing. Okay, I'm going to pray. Thank you for letting me talk, and I hope to see you all tomorrow as we pick it up in Revelation 12. So let's pray for a great day. God, thank you for this time, and bless the lunch that's to follow for those that can stay. Thank you for the good ground we've covered. I pray that this has been a learning and encouraging and equipping time, and we'll continue at another time. So bless our weekend and help us to have a great day of worship and growing in your grace tomorrow in Revelation chapter 12. And we thank you for your blessings on our lives and our church. We pray for Israel. We pray for the peace of Jerusalem. We pray for the peace of that region. And we look forward to your coming and to you resolving it all. And we thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. I believe there's lunch in the lobby. Thank you. So is there lunch out there? What do we got? Pizza. Go eat pizza. Have a great Saturday. If you joined us online, thank you for joining us.
Start at the manger. Heaven came down to earth. Prophesied, say